Chapter 1829. That's reasonable. Luo Qingchen seriously nodded at Nan Yixing. He didn't know why, but when he saw her dressed in black and her clear eyes trembling slightly, he felt an inexplicable throbbing. Ding, affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 10%. Suddenly thinking of the affection, Luo Qingchen had a new level of respect for Nan Yixing. His personality was elegant on the outside, but his heart was as hot as fire. Otherwise, how could he have affection for an assassin? Luo Qingchen had just finished speaking and hadn't come back to her senses when Nan Yixing had already walked into the prison. The two guards instantly bowed. "Greetings to your highness." He nodded, returning to his usual calm as water self as he looked at the guards. "Tell the Tiao Shang Gong to let that girl go." The two looked at each other before bowing. Yes. As soon as his voice fell, Nan Yixing turned to look at Luo Qingchen and Dong. "You two go stand to the side first. The Tiao Shang Gong can be a very vengeful person." His voice was very calm, but there was a faint trace of concern in it. Without knowing why, Luo Qingchen liked this feeling very much. After a while, the Tiao Shang Gong came out of the prison, followed by two maids who had already fainted and had a pale face. She looked at Nan Yixing and gave a palace bow. There was a strange look that flashed in her eyes as she said, "Your Highness must have been entrusted by someone, right?" "Whether I was entrusted by someone or not, it's not up to you to ask." Nan Yixing gave a soft laugh. His tone wasn't very serious when he said this, but the Tiao Shang Gong couldn't help trembling. She quickly kneeled down and said, "This servant doesn't dare. This girl, Your Highness, please be assured. Her life isn't in danger for now." The Tiao Shang Gong immediately responded, afraid of angering Nan Yixing again. She knew better than anyone that the Crown Prince wasn't a weak person who would be bullied by his brothers. He was just hiding his edge. 2 hours later, Qiuju woke up in the palace maid's quarters. Although she was still very weak, Luo Qingchen checked her pulse and confirmed that her life was not in danger. It was probably due to excessive blood loss that caused the temporary coma. Let's see if you still dare to spout nonsense in the future." Dong didn't forget to nag at her as she fed her the medicine. When Qiuju heard this, tears fell from her eyes in her sleep. His voice was weak and hoarse as he said, "I won't dare. I won't dare in the future." Luo Qingchen didn't blame her. After all, Qiuju had tasted the bitterness this time. She probably wouldn't dare to do it again in the future. In the end, Nan Yixing still didn't say anything about her kidnapping him tonight. He didn't even care about the chocolate beans she gave him. At the same time, in the Stellar Hall, the eunuch in charge lit a lamp and said, "His Highness seems to be in a good mood today." He narrowed his eyes and looked at the dagger on the table. The scene of them parting just now appeared in his mind. "I've already had the mama send the person you wanted back to the palace maid's quarters. If Miss Assassin doesn't have any other orders, I'll go back first." His deep eyes flashed with a faint light, and the corners of his mouth curved into a faint smile as he looked at her clear eyes. In the next second, her right hand suddenly grabbed his left hand and placed the dagger in his palm. "Very good. You've worked hard." Chapter 1830. She felt that her fair cheeks were slightly flushed, and her calm heart was beating wildly like a little deer. He looked at her running figure, and his heart suddenly bloomed. "There's a person called Shao Chun in the palace maid district." Nan Yixing gently rested his chin on his right hand, and a faint liguang flashed through his eyes. "Announce her to the Starry Hall tomorrow." The eunuch in charge was stunned for a moment and then said, "Yes." Early the next morning, the palace maid district's people had just woken up when Minister Taitong came in. Everyone panicked and saluted. Cough cough. Minister Taitong cleared her throat and looked at them. "Although you've just entered the palace, you haven't been assigned a room yet. But as you all know, His Highness the Crown Prince is choosing a concubine recently, and the Starry Hall is understaffed." I want to go, I want to go." One of the little girls raised her hand happily, but was fiercely glared back at by Minister Taitong. At this moment, she shut her mouth and lowered her head, not daring to say a word. Minister Taitong was her aunt, but she didn't show any favoritism. She entered the palace to become a palace made just to see His Highness the Crown Prince's face, but she didn't even have the chance to go to the Starry Hall. From today onwards, Chiuju, Dong-er, and Xiao Qin will go to the Starry Hall to work. There will naturally be someone there to tell you what to do. Luo Qinqin and Dong-er looked at each other, and roughly understood why they were suddenly transferred to the Starry Hall. It seemed that last night's matter wasn't over yet. The three of them were silent on the way to the Starry Hall. As the instigator, Luo Qinqin felt that last night's temporary uprising was completely a bad idea. It was probably because she and he had also experienced 30 planes, and was completely relying on him as the male lead to come up with such a plan. In fact, she was also gambling. After all, the situation was so urgent that she could only gamble. Gambling on a chance to ruin a lifetime. This gamble seemed to have succeeded, but also seemed not to have succeeded. Xiao Qin, do you think it's a blessing or a curse for us to go to the Starry Hall? Chiuju blinked her eyes and blinked again. Then, she looked at Luo Qinqin and said, "Tell me, how could you hold the Crown Prince hostage yesterday? This is a capital crime punishable by death." In the next second, Luo Qinqin and Dong-er covered Chiuju's mouth at the same time. "Even if you don't speak, no one will think you're mute." Luo Qinqin looked at her worriedly, indicating that this person really couldn't be taught. Yesterday's matter of life and death was completely thrown to the back of his mind after one night. Chiuju immediately made a gesture of sealing her mouth, indicating that from now on, she would not say a single word of nonsense. The journey from the palace maid market to the Star Palace Hall was not far, but on the way, they would pass by the side halls of the harem girls. Luo Qinqin did not forget to take a few glances. There really were quite a few exceptionally beautiful girls. But yesterday, Nan Yixing didn't seem to let any of the beauties into the Starry Hall. When they arrived outside the Star Palace Hall, the eunuch in charge looked at the three of them and said, "Who is Miss Xiao Qin? Come with this old servant." Luo Qinqin frowned slightly. Sure enough, Nan Yixing recognized her last night. It seemed that the assassin disguise was completely deceiving oneself. "System, I want to return it." "Sorry, the store does not accept returned items because they are contaminated with popularity. Bao Bao is a god." The moment she walked into the main hall, she took a deep breath. She had already thought of a way to deal with it. She decided. Chapter 1831. Your Highness, she's here. You can leave. When the doors to the Star Palace slowly closed, Luo Qinqin finally looked up. Nan Yixing was sitting on the throne, looking down as if he was writing something. His slender fingers were holding the brush, looking very elegant. "Miss Assassin, did you forget something?" He slightly looked up, a faint liguang flashing in his deep eyes as he looked at her with a deep meaning. Luo Qinqin's heart skipped a beat when she heard this. She said, "What is your Highness talking about? This servant doesn't understand." Other than pretending she didn't know, she couldn't find a better way to absolve herself. After all, she still didn't understand what this crown prince wanted to do. After a while, he slowly stood up, crossing his hands as he looked at Luo Qinqin. His lips curled as he said, "Your eyes are very beautiful." When he saw her at the ceremony yesterday, he felt that her eyes were very beautiful. They were like stars in the dark night, glowing like night pearls. Therefore, even though she had snuck into his palace in black last night, he had recognized her at a glance. "Thank Your Highness for your praise." Luo Qinqin pursed her lips and said, "But this servant doesn't understand Your Highness' serious meaning. My meaning is, you forgot to give me the antidote." He narrowed his eyes as a trace of gentleness appeared on his calm as water face. "That's right." Luo Qinqin immediately corrected herself, Did I say something wrong? I have to say, Miss Assassin, your taste for poison is very special. He softly walked forward and bent down in front of her. If you don't plan on giving me the antidote, you can give me another poison. When Nan Yixing said this, Luo Qingchen was stunned, and he was also stunned. He was stunned by his own words. He never thought that he would say something like this, something that would tug at someone's heartstrings. Ding, affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 20%. For Luo Qingchen, Nan Yixing's words were something that she never expected. It seemed like his personality was the same as what she had imagined. On the surface, he and his heart were two different worlds. In an instant, Luo Qingchen took out a chocolate bean from her pocket and stuffed it into his mouth. This is the antidote. I hope that Your Highness the Crown Prince will forgive this servant for the sake of the poison and the antidote. Actually, when she said this to him, there was a hint of coquettishness in her tone. After all, he had the system. After all, there was the notification sound. After all, there was the favorability. Luo Qingchen knew very well that he would not harm her. At the beginning of the plane, when she first started doing missions and only had 20% favorability, she would be inexplicably flustered. But now she was so arrogant that she could swell up. Although she knew that this was wrong, her current state was probably because she was spoiled. I don't understand why the antidote and poison taste so similar? Nan Yixing looked at her somewhat flustered eyes, and he couldn't help feeling very happy. This kind of happiness made all the blood in his body boil as it flowed into his heart. That. After 3 seconds, Luo Qingchen immediately forced out an excuse. She looked at him and said, "Everything in the world exists together. Poison and antidote belong together, so it's normal for the taste to be the same." Chapter 1832. Nan Yixing nodded seriously. Looking at her face, he said, "That makes sense. Then, can I go back to the palace made square?" Luo Qingchen blinked and asked where she was going. Although the Shanggong told her to go to the Starry Hall to work, she knew what was going on. After all, holding the Crown Prince hostage was a big deal. She couldn't drag Qiuju and Dong into the water. "You can live in the side hall for now. I'll arrange the specific sleeping quarters." Nan Yixing turned around. His eyes as deep as the sea flashed with a faint light. He knew very well that he was very happy. Luo Qingchen's clear eyes trembled. She didn't understand. Did Nan Yixing want her to serve those harem girls who hadn't married yet? Damn, I don't want to, okay? Luo Qingchen sighed softly and walked out of the hall dejectedly. Sure enough, 20% favorability was trash. She even bribed him with 2 chocolate beans. As soon as she walked out of the palace gate, Qiuju and Dong rushed up and winked, wanting to ask something. But when they saw the manager eunuch behind them, they immediately closed their mouth. The side hall of the Starry Hall was a certain distance from the main hall, although it was much closer than the palace-made square. Luo Qingchen was dressed in a palace-made uniform. When she entered the side hall, she naturally didn't receive the attention of the harem girls. It wasn't until the manager eunuch specially arranged a room for her that she received disdainful looks from all directions. One of the girls called Lan Yuding spoke first. Her tone was very sharp and full of disdain. "Eunuch, I have a question that I don't quite understand. Can I ask you?" She crossed her arms in front of her chest, looked up and held her head high. She had the aura of a princess consort. Looking at her really made people unhappy. The manager eunuch had been in the palace for many years. He naturally knew how to read people's expressions. He also knew the meaning of Lan Yuding's words. But in the palace, it was important to see through many things and not speak them out. Moreover, he had been by the crown prince's side for many years. Even if he couldn't completely guess his intentions, he could guess most of them. Although Little Chen was only a palace maid, she was not important to His Highness, but she must be very special. This was because, in all these years, He had never summoned a palace maid from the palace maid workshop into the Starry Hall. Just based on this point alone, it was something that many of the harem girls here could not reach. Miss Lon, please speak. The in-charge lowered his eyes and replied respectfully. Ahem, Lon Yuding cleared her throat and said, "This place should be the Crown Prince's side palace. It's normal for palace maids to come in and serve us, but it's not good to let palace maids live here." Lon Yuding's voice was very sarcastic, but because she was the daughter of the imperial censor in the palace, she was a notch nobler than many of the harem girls. Naturally, her words were very arrogant. Just this sharp sound made it hard for Luo Qingchen to take. This is not something this old servant can decide. The manager eunuch bowed and said, "Everything is arranged by His Highness. Miss Lon, please don't take it to heart. These 3 palace maids will probably live in the side palace for a few days. They won't stay for long." This sentence was said to him by Nan Yixing. Although the meaning in it was a bit deep, he seemed to be able to understand it. But even though the manager eunuch said so, Lon Yuding still didn't give up. Chapter 1833. When Luo Qingchen heard this, she narrowed her eyes and looked Lon Yuding up and down. She was dressed in an ivory-white patterned gauze and held a peony gauze fan in her hand. She looked especially noble. Her every movement gave off the feeling that she was already the mother of the world. It was probably because she was young and impetuous that she didn't understand that the most taboo thing in the harem was to suppress the crowd. Especially when you're just a harem girl without any rank or status. "You mean that the maids of the palace will dirty your place?" Luo Qingchen gave a shrug, not revealing a trace of fear in her eyes. But Qiuju and Dong who were standing next to her, lowered their heads and angrily pulled on her sleeve. Lon Yuding's expression was a bit ugly. She glared and gritted her teeth, of course. "What is my status? What is your status?" When her voice fell, she turned her eyes and looked at the manager eunuch with the aura of a master and said, "Eunuch should know whose daughter I am. We are a large group of harem girls. There is no way we can live in the same place as the servants." The manager eunuch's expression was clearly a bit awkward. He wanted to say something, but Luo Qingchen had already responded. "But I don't feel that you're dressed like a noble." She nodded slightly and looked Lon Yuding up and down. A trace of coldness flashed through her clear eyes, "But you look a bit similar to the proprietress of the easternmost fragrant courtyard." Although one should be cautious in speaking and acting in the palace, this sentence was meant to warn Dong Ju, not her. In her eyes, she would never be afraid of anything that could be done directly. "You're courting death." In the next second, Lon Yuding angrily rushed forward. She suddenly raised her right hand and slapped down. Luo Qingchen sneered. With a dong sound, she firmly focused on her wrist. "You dare to touch me?" Lon Yuding was about to raise her foot to kick her when Luo Qingchen suddenly pushed her wrist. She staggered back and fell to the ground. Without saying a word, she gave the maidservant beside her a look. The maidservant immediately understood and headed towards the Golden Palace to call for reinforcements. Luo Qingchen probably saw it, but she didn't stop it. This was because she was already very unhappy to be asked to dress up as a female supporting character, yet this female supporting character was especially pretentious. If she wasn't willing to serve him, she would be arrogant. "Host, you can do anything as you please now. I was so aggrieved in the previous plane. Can't I be impudent for a while?" Yes, of course. Little did they know, Lon Yuding thought that if she fell to the ground, there would be a group of people trying to curry favor with her to help her up. However, it seemed that not a single person stepped forward. They could even hear the faint sounds of mockery. Most of the beauties in the side hall were people of status. Although not all of them were the daughters of high officials, they were at least the pearls of their parents. Lon Yuding relied on the fact that she was the daughter of the imperial censor, and her words were always full of harshness. Although the time they spent together was very short, there were many people who disliked her. "Hey, why aren't you guys coming over to help this young miss up?" Her voice was full of anger and her cheeks were red. It was obvious at a glance that she was very angry with Luo Qingchen. The two women standing at the very front looked at each other. Because Lan Yuding was the daughter of the imperial censor, they still went forward to help her up. Chapter 1834. The girl in the pink dress who had helped her up was clearly aggrieved. She bit her lips and said, "Didn't the steward say it already? The palace maid will only stay for 2 days. Why are you so unforgiving?" Slap. As soon as she finished speaking, Lan Yuding's slap landed on her cheek. One had to know that she had used all of her strength to deliver this slap. She vented all her anger from being bullied by Luo Qingchen on this girl. The girl in the pink dress was directly knocked to the ground. Blood oozed out of her mouth and her face immediately turned pale. She didn't even have the strength to stand up. At this time, Lan Yuding's personal maid led the imperial censor in. The imperial censor didn't notice the person on the ground at all. He directly ran towards Lan Yuding and asked with concern, "What happened to my precious daughter? You've only been in the palace for a few days. What grievances have you suffered?" Looking at the imperial censor's deeply doting face, Luo Qingchen could roughly understand how Lan Yuding's self-centered character was formed. Father, woo, little did she know that when Lan Yuding saw the imperial censor, all traces of her previous anger disappeared. She had a delicate and pitiful appearance, and tears fell down in an instant. Don't cry, Aya, my little darling." The imperial censor patted her head and said in a strict tone, "Whoever dares to bully your father will have to bear the consequences." In the next second, Lan Yuding stretched out her arm and pointed directly at Luo Qingchen. "This lowly palace maid bullied me. She even pushed me just now." As soon as her voice fell, she didn't forget to add a proud expression to her tear-stained face. This expression seemed to be telling Luo Qingchen, "You're in big trouble." But Luo Qingchen's eyes didn't have the slightest bit of panic. She even wanted to laugh a little. The imperial censor turned around and glared at Luo Qingchen with his eyes wide open. He said angrily, "Insolent servant, you actually dared to offend your superiors. Didn't the imperial censor teach you that you must completely obey your master's orders since you entered the palace?" It had to be said that this imperial censor was indeed someone who had been in the palace for many years. When she spoke, she even knew how to frame him, unlike Lan Yuding, whose entire sentence was completely illogical. Cough, cough. In the next second, Luo Qingchen cleared her throat and said, "First, this person dressed like a brothel keeper isn't my master. Second, I'm a forgetful person. I've forgotten everything that Shang Gong taught me. What's going on? Come on." It was a head-on clash. If it wasn't for the heart-wrenching experience in the previous plane, she could probably still respect the rules of the plane. But now, she wasn't willing. For example, extreme joy begets sorrow, and extreme sorrow begets joy. The censor didn't expect Luo Qingchen to be so arrogant. She walked up to Lan Yuding, trying to replicate the action that Lan Yuding had just used on her. He rolled up his sleeves and glared at Luo Qingchen. "You're simply courting death." Not only the action, even the words are the same. Luo Qingchen shrugged and smiled faintly with disdain. Just as she was about to slowly raise her hand and grab his wrist again, a pair of slender fingers firmly grasped the imperial censor's dark wrist. Chapter 1835. Luo Qingchen froze for a moment. Turning her eyes, she saw a face she couldn't be more familiar with. This time, the male lead was really good-looking. That kind of evildoer with a touch of indifference, but his eyes were inexplicably hot. Very special, although she was still a bit angry about being transferred to the side hall. Since Nan Yixing came, it proved that not only did he send the manager eunuch, but he also secretly sent someone to follow her. She looked sideways at his profile, wanting to say something, but he leaned over and whispered in her ear, "Miss Assassin really has a personality, really, makes people worry." Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air because of Nan Yixing's actions. Everyone in the Nanzhao kingdom knew that the crown prince of the Nanzhao kingdom had a face that could charm thousands of young girls in the world. His temperament was as calm as water, not gentle, but he was a man that would make people fall in love with him. And this kind of man had never had a woman by his side, whether it was a concubine or a concubine, not a single one. However, at this moment, he was leaning over a palace maid, whispering in her ear. This kind of scene was really unbelievable. The manager eunuch who was standing at the side heaved a sigh of relief. There were beads of sweat on his forehead and his heart was still thumping non-stop. Although she probably knew that this palace maid called Xiao Chun had a special position in the crown prince's heart, but what she said to the imperial censor was really too arrogant. But now it seemed that her arrogance was justified, because the crown prince was completely on her side. No one dared to speak. Only the imperial censor slowly opened his mouth and said, "It is this old official's fault for disturbing the crown prince." But just now, this palace maid disobeyed her superiors, completely ignoring the harem of the crown prince's side hall. This old official wanted to teach her a little lesson. Hearing this, Luo Qingchen couldn't help but sneer in her heart. The people in the officialdom were indeed very good. They could turn black into white in an instant. "You!" Luo Qingchen wanted to say something back, but the imperial censor cut her off. "Actually, I don't quite understand what the censor meant by offending one's superior." Nan Yixing glanced at Luo Qingchen, giving her a warm and reassuring look. The moment she received such a gaze, her face unconsciously blushed a little. It's natural for a palace maid to offend a beauty. The censor didn't quite understand, but he didn't dare to be too confident in front of Nan Yixing. Even though what he said made sense, he put his hands in front of his chest and lowered his head as he said resentfully. She didn't know that in the next second, Nan Yixing's eyebrows moved slightly, and the corners of his mouth curved into an extremely faint smile. "When did I say she was a palace maid?" He originally wanted to place her in the side chamber for a few days and wait for the Stellar Hall's inner hall to be repaired before taking her over in the name of the crown prince. As for his identity, he hadn't decided yet. In fact, he wasn't completely sure what this girl in front of him meant to him. He just felt that she was very special. He would consciously or unconsciously think of her, and would constantly want to get closer to her. Although she was only a palace maid, she gave him such a dazzling feeling. No matter where she went, there was a dazzling light that took away his focus without warning. Chapter 1836. Hearing Nan Yixing's words, the censor was completely stunned. Not only her, but even Lan Yuding, who thought she had the aura of a queen, was stunned. She pouted her lips, and her princess temper came up. She looked at Nan Yixing in disbelief and said, "Your Highness, how can you protect a lowly servant instead of your own beauty?" Nan Yixing frowned slightly, and his eyes, which were like a sea of stars, suddenly became hazy. Luo Qingchen seemed to feel that the air around her was a little cold. She didn't even have to think about it to know that her male lead was angry. "My beauty!" He snorted coldly, and his eyes fell on Lan Yuding for the first time. He said softly, "I really don't need it." For the first time, Luo Qingchen felt that Nan Yixing could be so cold. These simple words didn't have the slightest warmth. Lan Yuding was completely stunned. She didn't come back to her senses at all. The crown prince in front of her was the one she had always wanted to marry. This time, the Wu people finally came to tell His Majesty that she was his princess consort in the hall. She thought, no matter status or beauty, no one would dare to claim second place among this group of beauties if she dared to claim first place. But the war hadn't even started yet, and she had lost to a palace maid? "Your Highness!" Lan Yuding's lips were a little pale, and there were shallow tears in her eyes. This was different from the tears just now. This time, she really felt sad in her heart. How could this be? How could the crown prince protect such a humble palace maid? From the day after tomorrow, this side hall will no longer exist. Nan Yixing's eyes swept over the crowd, and then he said, I wanted little Chun to stay here for 2 days, but I didn't expect that someone would take the place of the host. His last sentence was very straightforward, like a slap on Lan Yuding's face. The master here should be Luo Qingchen, the palace maid, not Lan Yuding, the beauty. She was shamelessly taking the place of the host. When the girls heard this, their eyes widened and their gazes landed on Lan Yuding. In their eyes, if Lan Yuding had not been so domineering, they might not have had to leave the palace. As long as they did not leave the palace, they would still have a chance. Whether it was the crown prince or the other princes, this was the only way to become a phoenix. However, because of Lan Yuding, all of them had no way out. In the next second, a harem girl wearing a floor-length skirt with plum blossoms knelt down and said, "Your Highness the Crown Prince, please forgive us. After we entered the palace, we have always scrupulously abided by our duties. No matter what, we have never crossed the line. But this Miss Lan has been overbearing time and time again. She doesn't treat us as human beings at all." Another person kneeled down and said, "Big Sister Chui Air is right. I hope your Highness will not drive us out of the side chamber. Even if we have to stay in the side chamber for the rest of our lives, it doesn't matter." In an instant all the beauties knelt down and kowtowed. "We hope that your Highness the Crown Prince will grant our wish." Seeing this scene, Luo Qingchen couldn't help but smile faintly. This time, Lan Yuding could be considered a group attack. It seemed that she usually treated the other beauties with the same attitude she treated her today. Her eyes grew to the top of her head. She was really arrogant. Chapter 1837. At this moment, Lan Yuding's face was as ugly as it could get. She didn't expect that this large group of harem girls would attack her at the same time. After all, she always thought that this group of people couldn't wait to be good to her and then curry favor with her. Little did she know, Luo Qingchen didn't find it strange at all. After all, to become a harem girl, she probably didn't have much hardship in her life. Who wasn't the favorite of their parents? Suddenly being bullied by someone of the same status, she naturally felt uncomfortable. You bunch of scoundrels!" Lan Yuding angrily stomped her feet and roared, "I definitely won't let go of." Slap. Before she finished speaking, there was a crisp and sweet sound of a slap in the air. 5 bright red handprints were printed on Lan Yuding's face. They came from her father, who had just desperately followed her orders. The so-called imperial censor. "Father." Lan Yuding covered her face. Big drops of tears fell down her face. Her eyes were full of grievances. The imperial censor looked at her very distressed, but there was really no other way. After being an official for so many years, he naturally knew that the always gentle crown prince was really angry today. He was the future king. No matter what, he couldn't offend him. "Kneel," he roared. His face was red, and the veins on his head were bulging. It could be said that he was quite angry. Lan Yuding was obviously frightened by him. She almost didn't have time to think and immediately knelt down. Since she was a child, her father had never been fierce to her. No matter what she did wrong, he couldn't even bear to scold her. But now, in front of everyone, he was so strict that she knelt down. The next second, the imperial censor knelt down by her side with a thud. He kowtowed heavily to Nan Yixing and said, "This old official didn't teach his daughter well. Please forgive me, Your Highness. Don't implicate her." This move was probably to win the hearts of the people. After all, many of the harem girls here had extraordinary family backgrounds. Now that he had offended the crown prince, he couldn't offend anyone else. Nan Yixing narrowed his eyes from beginning to end. His white and handsome cheeks looked indifferent, without any emotional fluctuations. Luo Qingchen stood by his side with her hands behind her back. It was like she was watching a play. He looked over from time to time. When he inadvertently saw her clear as water eyes, his heart couldn't help being stunned. Could it be that beauty was in the eye of the beholder? He felt. Her side profile was very beautiful. Ding, affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 30%. When the system's voice, Luo Qingchen's SS izzzzzzzzzzzz, Luo Qingchen's SSSSS. It's was, it s, it s, it s's. I don't care how long this hall stays. Nan Yixing paused before looking at Luo Qingchen with a gentle gaze. You can ask the girl beside me if she's willing or not. S right. T. Everyone's eyes fell onto Luo Qingchen. Countless gazes converged at this moment. Nan Yixing had completely pushed her to the highest point of the limelight. Everything seemed to have a dramatic reversal. A palace maid was deciding whether the harem girls would stay or leave. Chapter 1838. When Lan Yuding heard Nan Yixing's words, she stood there in a daze. She didn't recover for a long time. She couldn't understand why she had lost like this, and lost so miserably. At this moment, she was like a jumping clown, allowing everyone to watch. Her cheeks burned with pain, and her heart was filled with hatred for the palace maid in front of her. Withdrawing her admiring gaze, Luo Qingchen cleared her throat and looked at the girls. If you want my opinion, I don't care if you want to stay or leave. She pursed her lips, a faint smile on her lips. After speaking, she didn't forget to look at Nan Yixing. There was a faint light in his deep eyes, and when his gaze fell on her body, there was only a sense of exploration. Although his words and actions were very special to her, no matter what, he only had a 30% favorable impression of her. If Luo Qingchen didn't find it strange at all, it must be that she was blinded by love. After the matter in the side hall was settled, Luo Qingchen was directly taken back to Star Palace by Nan Yixing. This back and forth had attracted countless hatred for her, but she didn't gain anything at all. From today onwards, you will temporarily live here. Nan Yixing looked at her clear eyes and said, The 2 girls will be responsible for taking care of you. His gaze was soft, with a light that couldn't be seen clearly. Luo Qingchen nodded slightly. Looking at him, she asked, Your Highness, are you hiding a mistress in a golden house? She felt that the atmosphere was inexplicably awkward, and teasing him could probably alleviate this strange feeling. Nan Yixing's eyebrows moved slightly, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. No need to hide. I have already thought of the position of the princess consort. Although the person in front of her was the man who had gone through fire and water with her countless times, when he said these words in a new time and space, it still made her heart tremble. Me? Who else could it be? Nan Yixing raised his hand slightly, and his slightly cold fingertips touched her little dimples. Luo Qingchen's eyebrows trembled slightly. She was so nervous that her eyes kept trembling. Originally, she thought that by teasing the male lead, she would be able to alleviate the inexplicably ambiguous and awkward atmosphere. Little did she know that his gentle touch would actually cause her to unconsciously panic. The golden light shone through the window onto their faces. At this moment they looked so compatible. But, will Prince Nan agree? Luo Qingchen raised her clear eyes and said, after all, his status, based on what little Chen said in the side chamber just now, he didn't seem like someone who cared about his identity. He raised his sword-like eyes without the slightest bit of worry in them. This kind of feeling was somewhat different from the script that had been written in the palace since ancient times. Generally speaking, shouldn't the king's first wife for the crown prince be of equal social status? Seeing the doubt in Luo Qingchen's eyes, Nan Yixing gently patted her head and said, Don't worry. The crown prince of the Nanzhao kingdom has the right to choose his wife. Why? Luo Qingchen blinked her clear eyes and said, This kind of situation in other countries, it should be very rare. Luo Qingchen was shocked by her own almost quick mouth. After all, the relationship between the Mu kingdom and the Nanzhao kingdom was not as friendly as imagined. It was better not to expose this kind of thing for the time being. Chapter 1839. It had to be said that Nan Yixing was very different from what she saw on the surface. She felt that those flirtatious words coming out of his mouth were both elegant and enjoyable. She had to admit that she was very happy to enter the Starry Palace. Qiuju and Dong only regained their senses after following her into the side hall of the Stellar Hall. Their two little faces were filled with extreme excitement as they looked at her and said, "Little Chun, little Chun, little Chun, you've really become a phoenix this time. Wow, I'm so envious. But I'm very happy for you." Luo Qingchen held her cheek with one hand and knocked on the table with the other. She narrowed her eyes thoughtfully. "Does the Nanzhao kingdom worship the Wu people?" Qiuju and Dong looked at each other and then looked at Luo Qingchen with confusion. "Isn't little Chun from the Nanzhao kingdom?" "Oh." Luo Qingchen thought for a moment and then her eyes moved slightly. She began her long fantasy play. She looked at them and said, "You can't say that. I was born in the Nanzhao kingdom. Later, because my family was poor, I was always wandering around." She sighed as she spoke to create the atmosphere of the story. "Oh, so that's how it is." Dong comforted her with a worried expression. "Little Chen is so pitiful. Although my family was poor, at least I had a thatched hut and a place to stay. At least I wasn't always outside. My family wasn't poor. Later, my father was addicted to gambling and lost everything. In the end, he even lost me." Qiuju's face didn't seem to have recovered. She was a bit pale from a day of running around. But when she told her story, she became spirited. As expected, Qiuju is an optimist. Luo Qingchen's eyes moved slightly. She changed the topic back to what she wanted to know. She pursed her lips and asked, "So Prince Nan and His Highness both believe the Wu people's words without a doubt?" "Of course. The Wu people are the sky of the Nanzhao kingdom." Qiuju looked at Luo Qingchen and explained, "Aunt Luo Xian is not the saintess of the Wu people. If she was, even Prince Nan would have to kowtow to her." Seeing that Qiuju's voice was a little loud, Dong hurriedly patted her head as a warning. "Do you want to be caned again?" Qiuju hurriedly stuck out her tongue and raised her hands in surrender. I'm sorry. It's all my fault." She made the gesture of sealing her mouth while talking. Luo Qingchen shook her head to show that she seemed a bit familiar with this gesture. That's right. You'd better stop talking. Let me do it." Donger made a pot of tea for them and slowly told the story of the Nanzhao kingdom and the Wu people. 400 years ago, the princess of the Nanzhao king was the holy maiden of the Wu people. At that time, the Wu people strictly forbade the holy maiden and the people of the floating dust tribe from being together and forcibly separated them. What they didn't know was that the holy maiden wanted to run away with the king that night and angered the heavenly spirit flower array of the Wu people. It caused the entire Nanzhao kingdom to be filled with sand and fall into an apocalyptic darkness. From that night on, the Nanzhao kingdom never saw daylight again. The wind and sand kept blowing and drowned the Nanzhao kingdom under the yellow sand. The entire Nanzhao kingdom was desolate. The holy maiden couldn't bear to see this and decided to leave the king. She returned to the sky snow peak alone and used a secret technique to calm the heavenly spirit flower array. After that night, the Nanzhao kingdom was no longer ravaged by the wind and sand. Everything returned to peace. Chapter 1840. The Wu family knew that they had made a big mistake and caused countless people to lose their homes. In order to atone for their mistake, the Wu people rebuilt the heavenly spirit flower array on the heavenly snow peak in the palace of the Nanzhao kingdom. It was said that on that day, holy water flowed down the heavenly spirit flower array and fell into the heavenly lake. The yellow sand on the ground seemed to welcome the rising sun. It was the first time in a long time that the Nanzhao kingdom welcomed the day. The king stood in front of the heavenly spirit flower array and seemed to have aged 30 years. The chief of the Wu people bowed deeply to him. That was the apology of the whole family. For so many innocent people who died, for the saintess of the Wu people, so where did the witch race's saintess go in the end? Luo Qingchen was strangely infatuated with this story, feeling that it was a very sad story. Donger shrugged and blinked her big, lively eyes as she said, "Who knows? It's a legend. Legends should have an end." Luo Qingchen couldn't help but think of the fear she felt when she saw the heavenly spirit flower array that day. The Wu people were not that simple. The end was that the Wu people and the Nanzhao kingdom had a good relationship and blessed the Nanzhao kingdom with good weather and peace, to pay tribute to the dead people who died in the wind and sand because of the Wu people's mistake. Although Donger explained, Luo Qingchen still didn't understand many things. For example, where did the saintess go? For example, why did the heavenly spirit flower array cause such a disaster? But she felt that even if she kept asking, Donger wouldn't give her an answer. After weighing the pros and cons, she washed her face and went to bed. She had to admit that the quilt in Nan Yixing's palace was very comfortable. She felt like she could sleep until the end of time. Or maybe she was a little tired these 2 days. The next morning, Qiuju and Donger, who were both palace maids, helped her wash up. She was not used to the sudden change in status. Go do your work. I'll do it myself. I'll do it. No need. I'll do it myself. It's right for a servant to serve a master. Qiuju's mouth looked like it was sprinkled with honey as she looked at her and said, "What's more, it's a master who is so beautiful and has special protection." Luo Qingchen fell into thought when she heard this. It seemed like her personality had been completely exposed and wasn't hidden at all. For example, she was a very protective person. She had officially moved into the Starry Hall. Although she hadn't been conferred a title yet, other than Qiuju and Donger, everyone else was present. Qiuju and another 4 palace maids and a nanny came in. Each of the palace maids was holding a big box in their hands. It was golden and shiny, and one could tell at a glance that the things inside were valuable. The palace maids and grannies in front of him were dressed differently from Qiuju and Dong. It was obvious that the palace maids were of a much higher rank than them. Luo Qingchen and Luo Qingchen. Luo 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 Luo. Luo 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 Luo. The items in each box were different. The first box contained silk and satin, the second box contained gold and silver, the third box contained antiques, calligraphy and paintings, and the fourth box contained gold ingots. Chapter 1841. She had always thought that Nan Yixing was a very gentle and elegant person. She hadn't expected him to be so domineering. It was the first time Qiuju and Donger had seen such a scene in their lives. They were a bit frightened. They couldn't help but rub their eyes and swallow their saliva at the sight of the box full of gold and silver, as well as the glittering gold. Luo Qingchen could understand why they wiped their eyes. But why did they swallow their saliva? Did gold taste good? Yes, I know. She nodded calmly. There was a faint light in her clear eyes as she asked, "Where did His Highness go?" His Highness told this servant to tell Miss Qin that he went to Prince Nan's golden palace. Yes, you can leave first. Yes. When the door was closed, Qiuju and Donger excitedly shouted, Yeah, when did we have to call you Her Highness? What Her Highness? She's the crown princess. The future princess consort. Luo Qingchen narrowed her eyes and put her hands on her hips as she looked at them. When I become the crown princess, the first order will be to lock you 2 in the secret prison. Don't. Crown princess consort, please don't be angry. Qiuju doesn't dare. Future princess consort, please don't be angry. Kacha. At this moment, the door to the side hall was opened. Luo Qingchen only felt her heart skip a beat. Her cheeks turned red and quickly spread to her ears. She turned her eyes and wanted to give Qiuju and Donger a fierce glare. Little did she know that they had quickly retreated to the side, lowering their heads and not daring to look at her. She habitually raised her right hand to touch her ear. Standing there, she asked herself 2 questions. Was everyone talking very loudly just now? Nan Yixing had just come back. He shouldn't have heard it, right? After these 2 questions ran through her mind, Luo Qingchen felt a bit embarrassed. She smiled brightly at Nan Yixing, who slowly walked in with his hands clasped behind his back. This servant greets Your Highness. Nan Yixing stepped forward, a faint smile on his lips. He stood in front of him and said, "I'm not used to Miss Assassin being so polite all of a sudden. Is there something you need?" "No," Luo Qingchen replied almost instantly. She shook her head and said, "What could have happened? Just now I seem to have heard you all discussing something about the Crown Prince's consort." Nan Yixing's beautiful eyes sparkled, and his thin lips curved into a beautiful arc. He looked at her with a gentle smile from beginning to end and said, "I stood at the door for a long time. I shouldn't have misheard." Qiuju and Dong sucked in a breath of cold air when they heard this. Then, after feeling Nan Yixing's strong aura, they suddenly lowered their heads. They had no intention of standing up for their master. Damn. Plastic friendship. Luo Qingchen couldn't help muttering in her heart. Then she cleared her throat and suddenly looked at Nan Yixing and said, "You heard right. We were discussing the Crown Prince's consort. There are so many good-looking women in the palace. Your Highness chooses, he chooses you." Before Luo Qingchen could finish her explanation, Nan Yixing directly interrupted her. I mean. His decisive words made Luo Qingchen a bit speechless. She pursed her lips and said, "Prince Nan agrees. Well, in 7 days you will be the Crown Prince's consort. Are you ready to be the future queen?" Chapter 1842. When Luo Qingchen heard this, she was completely stunned. Nan Yixing's actions were too fast, so fast that it was completely different from the script of the ancient palace dramas. She had never thought that it would be so easy for someone of her status to become the Crown Prince's official wife. "Silly girl, why are you still in a daze?" His eyebrows moved slightly as he looked at Qiuju and Dong who were standing behind her with their heads lowered. They are right. Luo Qingchen could faintly hear the two girls' laughter. She didn't know why, but her heart felt inexplicably warm. It was as if God had closed all her doors, but asked her to silently look at a window. The light coming in from the window was very cold, like a warm wind blowing into her heart. "What?" Luo Qingchen's clear eyes trembled. She looked away with some embarrassment and pursed her lips. "I just felt that it was a bit sudden." "It's not sudden." Nan Yixing gently raised his right hand and stroked the peony between her eyebrows. "It's really beautiful." Luo Qingchen touched her eyebrows in confusion. She nodded and asked, "Are you talking about this?" He nodded lightly. His deep eyes held an emotion that others didn't know, as if he was immersed in his own memories. Luo Qingchen thought for a moment. In the original owner's memory, the peony between her eyebrows wasn't drawn on. It seemed to be a scar left by an accident. Later, she didn't know what happened, but it became a peony mark. Because these vague memories came from before she was 7 years old, there were only some vague fragments that weren't very clear. "Is it beautiful?" "It seems to be because of an injury when you were young." I know." Nan Yixing seemed to feel that he had said something wrong and hurriedly corrected himself. "You should rest well these days. Tomorrow there will be a competition between the princes." "Competition?" Luo Qingchen's eyebrows moved. A faint liguang flashed in her eyes. He asked, "You want to participate, right?" Originally, there was no need for that. Nan Yixing smiled tenderly. He gently took Luo Qingchen's hand and walked towards the soft couch in front of them. As he walked, he said, "But my third brother was rather insistent, so father let me try." Luo Qingchen looked enlightened and fell into deep thought. This scene had appeared in the memories of the original owner. At that time, the original owner had blocked a sword for Nan Yixing and suffered heavy injuries. Only then did she enter the Star Palace. But now, her status was different. She was already the future Crown Prince's wife, so she didn't need to use tricks like blocking the sword to attract Nan Yixing's attention. How was she going to help him win the competition? In her memory, the so-called third brother, Nan Yong, was a particularly valiant person. Because his former mother was a child of the grassland, his character was also particularly strong. In his eyes, if he could win by force, he would be able to obtain the world. Therefore, He was quite dissatisfied with Nan Yixing's position as the crown prince. "Don't worry, His Highness will definitely win." Luo Qingchen raised her eyebrows and a confident smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Nan Yixing looked at her smile and an inexplicable warmth filled his heart. It was very warm. But how could he let her go? "You just stay in the palace. My martial arts aren't good, so I will definitely lose." He looked at her clear eyes and gently tapped her nose. "I don't want you to come and see me lose." Suddenly, those who had hidden their identities for so long wanted to bask in the sunlight at this moment. Because he had a tie. Chapter 1843. Although Nan Yixing didn't allow her to go, she still went the next day. She even got up early and used the silk, satin, gold, and silver that Nan Yixing gave her to dress herself up. After an hour of dressing up, she looked at her devastatingly beautiful face in the mirror and couldn't help but smile. Qiuju and Dong who were standing to the side and helping her tidy up her hair, couldn't stop talking. "Wow! Looking at little Chun now, I suddenly feel that you and His Highness are a match made in heaven." Yes, yes. A talented man and a beautiful woman, a match made in heaven. That day in the side hall, Lan Yuding used so much face powder, but it still couldn't hide the dark yellow color of her skin. I think so too, and she even put on red lipstick. When you two flatter each other, it's really… Luo Qingchen shook her head and said, "It gives me goosebumps all over." "That's because little Chun is really good looking." Qiuju looked at her with a fangirl expression and cleared her throat. "Crown Princess, are you planning to go and cheer for His Highness? This mouth of yours." Luo Qingchen raised her right hand and tapped her on the head. "It's like eating honey." It had to be said that in this palace full of strangers, Qiuju and Dong had given her a lot of warmth. Sometimes, simple companionship was better than many things. The martial arts arena. This was a specially built arena in the palace for the princes to spar with each other every year. Luo Qingchen wore a jade-colored whirlpool blue dress. Her hair was combed into a luan bun, and a magpie hairpin was inserted into the top of her head. She slowly walked towards Nan Yixing. When the breeze blew, peach blossom petals mixed with snowflakes fell to the ground. She smiled faintly at him, and he couldn't help but panic. But in the next second, he frowned with worry. He clearly told her not to come, but she still came. After all, this was a place of real swords and spears. What if the swords had no eyes and she got hurt at the same time? All the princes looked in the direction of Luo Qingchen. Everyone's eyes flashed with surprise. There was actually such a beautiful woman in this world, and this woman was originally just a palace maid. It was simply unbelievable. Prince Nan looked at Luo Qingchen for a few seconds and nodded with satisfaction. As expected of someone with status, regardless of whether it was her beauty or her temperament, she could outshine the crowd wherever she went. Luo Qingchen quickly glanced at them, and her eyes finally fell on Nan Yixing's third brother, Nan Yong. He was also looking at her with an inexplicable sense of admiration. After all, everyone had a love for beauty. However, the eyes of the woman sitting beside him were filled with hatred. Luo Qingchen narrowed her eyes and remembered who this person was. Wasn't that Lan Yuding, who had argued with her in the side hall before? It seemed that she couldn't hook up with His Highness the Crown Prince, so she immediately turned around and found Nan Yong. Today, she also came with Nan Yong to participate in the annual martial arts competition of the Nanzhao Kingdom. She should be his favorite. Luo Qingchen withdrew her gaze and stood beside Nan Yixing. She looked sideways at him and winked. "Your Highness, I'm here to cheer for you." "Didn't I tell you not to come?" He frowned slightly, and his eyes were filled with obvious worry. His tone was gentle and somewhat helpless as he said, "You're really worrisome. Since I'm going to be your crown princess, shouldn't I fight side by side with you?" She pursed her lips and gently shook his sleeve with her right hand. Chapter 1844. Luo Qingchen froze for a moment. Her cold hands were instantly surrounded by his warm hands. Nan Yixing's palms were very warm, When he held her tightly, she could feel her position in his heart. It was a kind of domineering possessiveness. No matter what happens later, you must sit on the high seat. You're not allowed to come down or run around. He said this in a very serious tone. After all, he was the crown prince. Everyone in the martial arts conference wanted to injure him or even kill him. I know. Luo Qingchen nodded obediently. With a sweet smile on her lips, she said, I will sit on the high platform obediently. I will never let you worry. So obedient? Of course. Luo Qingchen looked at him and said, It's fine as long as you look in my direction occasionally. She suddenly wanted to act coquettishly with Nan Yixing. Maybe he would be moved and her affection for him would increase. Good. He nodded and took her hand to the center. Father, this is the crown princess that I want to marry. Nan Yixing looked up and down at Luo Qingchen and then nodded with satisfaction. Very good, very good. Luo Qingchen gave a big bow. When she looked up at Nan Yixing, she was inexplicably nervous. She felt that there was an unusual emotion in his dark eyes, but she couldn't quite understand it. After the bow, Nan Yixing took Luo Qingchen's hand and sat down on the high platform. As soon as they sat down, Nan Yixing spoke. Second brother, I heard that your martial arts have improved a lot this year. As your younger brother, I have never had a chance to compare notes with you. Nan Yixing suddenly stood up and stretched his body. How about we compete in the first round? Nan Yixing frowned. He knew that he had no chance to refuse. He wanted to delay the fight until later and think of countermeasures. But now, his third brother didn't intend to give him a chance. He glanced sideways at Luo Qingchen, who had already started eating snacks and drinking tea. He couldn't help but smile helplessly. She was indeed a little girl. Perhaps she really thought that this was just a competition where one would stop at a certain point. However, only he knew that Nan Yixing would definitely not let him off. Since third brother has said so, second brother will not refuse your kindness. Nan Yixing slowly got up and walked towards the center of the martial arts field. There were different weapons on the left and right side. Nan Yixing directly picked up a long sword, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes. Finally, he could share a stage with the so-called crown prince. In his eyes, this kind of useless prince was not worthy of being the crown prince. However, Prince Nan was biased. No matter how good his achievements were on the battlefield, Prince Nan had never wavered in his heart. He refused to accept this. They were not convinced at all. Now that he finally had this opportunity, he would definitely do his best. He wanted to tell Prince Nan that only those with unparalleled martial arts could rule the country and become the Prince of Nanzhao Kingdom. Second brother, haven't you thought about what weapon to use? Nan Yixing stood in front of him with a long sword in his hand and a disdainful smile on his lips. In his eyes, Nan Yixing's martial arts could not be compared with his at all. What he wanted to do was to defeat him in 3 seconds and make him completely lose face. Nan Yixing raised his eyebrows slightly and a touch of coldness appeared in his eyes. He was enduring Nan Yixing's sarcasm. Chapter 1845. The next second, he picked up a blue long sword and looked at Nan Yixing. Third brother, please. Nan Yixing's mouth twitched in disdain. The long sword in his hand flew towards Nan Yixing's direction. Sitting on the high platform, Luo Qingchen couldn't help but frown. This so-called third brother really didn't intend to hold back at all. This was a move aimed at killing Nan Yixing. In an instant, Luo Qingchen's right hand gently tapped on the table. The exquisite ring on her ring finger glowed faintly with golden light. When the sword was in front of Nan Yixing's throat, she raised her eyebrows and the scene around her froze. The host is using time freeze. Luo Qingchen found that since she didn't use the exchange points, even the system's voice had changed. She lifted her long skirt and walked towards the center of the martial arts field. Snow was falling all around. Luo Qingchen stood beside Nan Yixing and didn't forget to admire his face for a few seconds. He was really good-looking. Even the beautiful scenery of flying snow was slightly inferior in front of him. He was wearing a white brocade robe. His right hand was tightly holding a blue long sword. The blue veins on his slender fingertips were bulging. But his expression was still indifferent. The white snowflakes fell on his long eyelashes. It was so quiet. No wonder so many people were infatuated with Nan Yixing. He really had a magnificent face. On the other hand, Nan Yixing's face was full of stubble. His thick eyebrows were pointing upwards. He looked like a warrior. His appearance was too rough. Luo Qingchen couldn't help shaking her head. Finally, her eyes fell on the long sword. Just now, she was too far away to see clearly. She thought the sword was aimed at Nan Yixing's throat. But in fact, it wasn't. It should be in the direction of his shoulder. This was indeed consistent with the memory of the original host. The reason was that when the original host blocked the sword with her body, she was injured in the direction of her shoulder. But she felt a little strange. Although Nan Yixing's appearance was a bit rough, his attack just now was indeed very fierce. As a man with good martial arts, he couldn't just stab Nan Yixing's shoulder. After all, after the space-time freeze, Luo Qingchen could see the deep killing intent in Nan Yixing's eyes. In any case, he did want to pretend to kill Nan Yixing by accident today. He was gambling on the position of Crown Prince, gambling on his own life. Luo Qingchen couldn't help but snort softly and murmur. The courage of a boorish man, however, since Nan Yixing's initial goal was to kill Nan Yixing with one stab, would he temporarily deviate from the path and stab in the direction of the shoulder? Or perhaps, Nan Yixing dodged it himself? Luo Qingchen frowned. She felt that it was impossible. After all, she still had the memory of the original owner. Nan Yixing had always been a man who didn't know any martial arts. He looked very calm and collected. A host, don't let your imagination run wild. Space-time freeze is about to end. Wow, level 4 space-time freeze was that weak? Although she was complaining, her body actually started to take action. In an instant, she threw Nan Yixing's sword to the ground and pushed him down with all her strength. Then she pointed Nan Yixing's sword at Nan Yixing on the ground. Finally, she touched the corner of his mouth and slowly raised it. Then she clapped her hands and returned to her seat on the high platform. The next second, she habitually tapped the table with the fingertips of her left hand. Her right hand picked up the white wine cup and took a sip. In an instant, the exquisite ring flashed with golden light. Space-time freeze was over. Hiss! At this moment, everyone let out a cry of surprise. Chapter 1846. What's going on? I just saw Prince Nan attack the Crown Prince. How come he suddenly fell to the ground? It feels like magic. It's really eye-opening. It turns out that the Crown Prince is not only elegant, but also excellent in martial arts. Whispers were fermenting in the heavy snow. Nan Yixing frowned slightly and looked at Nan Yixing, who was lying on the ground uncoordinated. You lost. Nan Yixing was stunned for a long time and didn't come back to his senses. He didn't know he lost until the applause sounded. And he lost so inexplicably, so unreasonably. No! He gritted his teeth and said, let's have another round. Yixing. Prince Nan frowned and looked at him with displeasure. Brothers should stop fighting. Since Yixing won, there's no need for a second round. Father. Nan Yixing was obviously not reconciled, but he couldn't say anything because of Prince Nan's words. He could only glare at Nan Yixing angrily and then sit on the high seat. But at this moment, Nan Yixing's eyes flashed with a faint dark light. Just now, in that split second, he definitely didn't point his sword at Nan Yixing. He just moved sideways at an extremely fast speed, minimizing the damage to the minimum. But what was going on? He couldn't help but think of the girl who smiled sweetly at him and told him, "You will win." Did it have something to do with her? Nan Yixing returned to his seat and looked at Luo Qingchen's indifferent eyes. She wasn't surprised by the scene just now. Instead, she looked like she was watching a play. I won. Nan Yixing said slowly. There was a faint light in his deep eyes as he looked at Luo Qingchen. She poured him a pot of hot tea and handed it to him with a smile. I saw it. She was sure to win. Didn't he know who she was? The point was that she had to win beautifully and catch the opponent off guard. Nan Yixing took the teacup and drank it in one gulp. He put down the teacup and lifted his right hand to tuck a strand of her hair behind her ear. He said, "It's cold. Let's go back after a while." At this moment, Luo Qingchen felt that the man in front of her was particularly gentle. She was like an angel that had descended from the heavens, receiving the love of thousands of people for her entire life. Whether it was her appearance or her personality, she was perfect. It wasn't until one day that she realized that perhaps Nan Yixing wasn't an angel, but a demon filled with endless obsession. After the martial arts conference, everyone returned to the palace. Nan Yixing didn't participate in the final competition. The only winner was Nan Yong, the son of another prince. After all, Nan Yong was eliminated by Nan Yixing in the first round. As one could well imagine, a martial artist who had lost in the martial arts competition that he was most proficient in was naturally very unconvinced. However, he did not have the opportunity to fight back. She heard that many people in Nan Yong's sleeping quarters were hungover. They smashed everything they saw and hit anyone they saw. The most miserable one was none other than the woman who had just become his new love, Lan Yuding. When Luo Qingchen saw Lan Yuding again, she almost didn't recognize her. Her whole face was completely swollen and bruised. Her originally good-looking red phoenix eyes were directly covered with black and purple bruises, which completely covered her eyes. When Lan Yuding saw her, she was no longer arrogant. Instead, she hurriedly left with her face covered. Luo Qingchen looked at her back. In ancient times, a woman's life was completely entrusted to the man she chose. Chapter 1847. On the eve of the wedding, Luo Qingchen spent most of her time eating and drinking in the starry hall. No one made trouble for her, and no one stopped her from becoming the crown princess. Everything seemed to be going so smoothly. Everything seemed to be going so well. It was like she was a spoiled princess when she came to this world. From the beginning to now, she had never encountered any obstacles. Was it because the story of the last plane was too bleak? Or was it because the original's love was too stubborn, but she ended up like this, so her life became so smooth? Luo Qingchen didn't understand, and didn't want to understand. But she knew that this was an A-grade plane, and many things were not so simple. Because even if Nan Yixing was so determined to marry her as the only princess, his affection for her was still at 40% and didn't move forward. There must be a reason. She didn't know the reason. "What are you thinking about?" Nan Yixing stood behind her, picking up the comb on the table to gently count her hair. The moment his slender fingers touched her hair, her heart couldn't help palpitating. Gentle people always made people feel special warmth. Luo Qingchen laughed softly and blinked, saying, "I'm thinking about what I should wear when I get married." These days, the palace maids and mamas had sent many phoenix coronets and robes. Luo Qingchen looked very good, so she had difficulty choosing. Of course, this was just a reason to change the topic. "You can wear whatever you like. I'll just wear the other one according to your choice." Nan Yixing put on a hollow phoenix bow for her, saying, "Because my crown princess looks good no matter what she wears." Luo Qingchen pursed her lips, her eyes filled with joy. Her cheeks were slightly red as she said, "It seems that Your Highness the Crown Prince is very different from the rumors. What happened to floating in the world and being as light as water?" "It's probably because I haven't met you yet." When he said this, his eyes looked faintly outside the window. Snowflakes fell down one by one. He looked up and said softly, "Do you want to see the snow?" Luo Qingchen was stunned. She felt that the look in Nan Yixing's eyes was inexplicably familiar. It was as if she had seen this kind of gaze in her memories on a snowy day like this before. "Sure." Luo Qingchen gently nodded. When she was about to get up, she was wrapped in a large cloak. It's not good to catch a cold. His tone was very light, as if it was a very calm warning without any intention. The imperial palace was very big and there were many places she had never been to. But Nan Yixing took her to the Heavenly Spirit Flower Array in front of the Golden Hall. The snow was falling heavily, but it did not affect the holy water in the Heavenly Spirit Flower Array at all. Under the contrast of the 4 crystal beads, the azure light waves formed a scene where the sea and the sky merged into one color. This is the place where I first met you. Nan Yixing held her hand tightly, afraid that the floor would slip and cause her to fall. At the time, he did not understand why the first time he saw this girl, he felt like he had seen her for 10,000 years. It was like he had passed through time and space, and all the memories were frozen at this moment, becoming eternal. It was not until she appeared in the Starry Hall as an assassin that he knew why she felt so familiar. Chapter 1848. I still remember that it was Prince Nan who wanted to take in a concubine for His Highness the Crown Prince. Luo Qingchen pursed her lips, pretending to be proud. She still remembered the row of orioles and swallows standing there, looking at Nan Yixing with admiration. At that moment, his white robes fluttered and his face was as calm as water, making him look so good. And now, she was about to become this youth's only official concubine. That's right. Hearing this, Nan Yixing's lips curled into a faint smile. Didn't I just happen to marry you? At that time, His Highness the Crown Prince probably didn't have this plan. Luo Qingchen's clear eyes smiled. Standing in front of the Heavenly Spirit Flower Array, the cold air emitted by the sacred water seemed to penetrate her cloak and clothes, directly blowing into her heart. Nan Yixing looked at her focused appearance, and a faint light flashed through his beautiful eyes. He muttered, "What's wrong?" Luo Qingchen narrowed her eyes and gently shook her head. "Nothing, I just felt that the Heavenly Spirit Flower Array was built very majestically and couldn't help but sigh." At that time, she was standing too far away and didn't see the Wu people's Heavenly Spirit Flower Array clearly. Now that such a majestic scene appeared in front of her eyes, she was truly shocked. "Let me tell you a story." He glanced to the side and looked into her clear eyes. "A very moving story." "A story?" Luo Qingchen was stunned for a moment before asking, "Are you going to tell me a story from 400 years ago? I've heard of it, it's indeed a—" "No." He shook his head and interrupted Luo Qingchen's words. He softly sighed. "It's a story from 10 years ago." 10 years ago? Luo Qingchen counted with her fingers, calculating her age. 10 years ago, wasn't she 5 years old? She still remembered that the original owner had no memory of anything before she was 5 years old. She drifted outside for 4 years and entered the Mu Empire when she was 9 years old. After 3 years of fighting, she became an outstanding member of Mu Hanche's hidden guards at the age of 12. In the following 3 years, they went through fire and water for Mu Hanche. Every time they returned injured, they would bandage each other's wounds. Until Qi Mo's death. When such a desolate memory suddenly appeared in her mind, she suddenly felt her emotions fluctuate inexplicably, and a thin layer of mist unconsciously appeared in her eyes. Nan Yixing was just about to tell the story, but stopped when he saw her like this. He slowly raised his right hand and touched her eyes. He asked nervously, "What's wrong?" "No." Luo Qingchen closed her eyes and felt the warmth from his palm. Her eyebrows trembled slightly as she took a deep breath and said, "I just want to gather my emotions and listen to your moving story. Don't cry." His smile carried a hint of helplessness as he looked at her and said, "If you cry, I won't be able to continue." "All right." She slowly opened her eyes and nodded seriously. Nan Yixing's story wasn't long, but it sounded a little sad. 10 years ago, an 8-year-old boy went to the heavenly snow peak alone to search for a medicinal ingredient. Little did he know that he encountered an avalanche and was trapped in the mountain for 10 whole days. Those 10 days were the darkest 10 days of the boy's life. There was no water, no food, and in the vast expanse of white snow mountain, he waited for his life to fade away bit by bit. When he was close to despair, a girl wearing a moon-white dress and carrying a clear jade lamp appeared above his head. Chapter 1849. In the end, the 5-year-old girl saved the youth and gave him all the food she had on her. The youth looked at the girl and couldn't help but fall into a daze. Her eyes were very beautiful as the clear spring on the heavenly mountain. It was as if he could see his own reflection in her eyes. At that time, the young man was a very ugly person. His face was covered with a dense mass of green things that looked like poisonous insects. These things kept spreading. His eyes, nose, ears, mouth, every part of his body was covered in them. Just as she was about to ask something, the youth covered his face. The young man hurriedly covered his face and said, "Don't look, it will scare you." He was poisoned. A very rare poison. No one knows where the antidote is. I only heard that the spirit breath grass on the heavenly snow peak can cure all strange poisons in the world. He resolutely decided to leave the Nanzhao kingdom and head to the heavenly snow peak. However, he didn't expect to encounter an avalanche and almost lose his life. "Don't be afraid." The girl raised her delicate right hand and touched the youth's face. "I just want to ask if it hurts. You should be poisoned." You know? A trace of surprise flashed through the youth's eyes. It was as if he saw the hope of life. "I don't know what poison it is, but the elders should know." The girl looked at him. "I'll take you to the heavenly snow peak." In the end, the girl took the youth to the heavenly snow peak. When the Wu people elders saw the youth, they were very surprised. They then told him that if he wanted to get the spirit breath grass, he had to defeat the large python in the 10,000 snake cave. The youth didn't hesitate at all. He gripped the peachwood sword in his hand and headed towards the 10,000 snake cave. Little did he know that the 5-year-old girl was worried about the youth going alone, so she secretly followed him. In that great battle, the youth was seriously injured. In order to save him, the girl didn't hesitate to use the Wu people's sacred technique. The seal between her eyebrows opened and a crack appeared. The youth saw this happen with his own eyes, but he couldn't do anything. His own weakness made him unable to deal with the large python. He could only watch as the girl used her life to fight it. He didn't know how long he held on. He only knew that even when he lost all consciousness, his eyes were still open. When he opened his eyes again, the youth was already in a thatched hut under the heavenly snow peak. The poison in his body had been completely removed, and the ones taking care of him were a pair of elderly people. Apart from them, there were also 2 women dressed in white brocade. At a glance, one could tell that they were from the Wu people. "The leader of the Wu people knows who you are and who poisoned you with the 3 insects and 3 flowers poison. This time, you owe the Wu people. If you become the king of the Nanzhao kingdom in the future, don't forget that the Wu people's saintess saved your life. Is she okay?" This was the only question the young man asked. He suddenly felt that he had changed, because at this moment, what he cared about was not whether or not the poison in his body had been cured, but the girl's comfort. The 2 Wu people didn't tell the young man the answer. They only said, "Sir, you just need to remember that you owe our young girl." He didn't know what this sentence meant, but he knew that from that day onwards, he had never seen this girl again. He didn't even know if he would still be able to recognize her when he saw her again after 10 years. What do you think? Isn't it a very touching story? Nan Yixing raised his right hand and gently stroked her forehead. Chapter 1850. After a while, Luo Qingchen narrowed her eyes and came back to her senses. "It is indeed a sad story." Nan Yixing looked into her eyes for a long time. Finally, his eyes, which were as deep as the sea, gradually dimmed. There were many things he wanted to ask in his heart, but he didn't ask in the end. Because the girl standing in front of him didn't seem to remember anything. Large snowflakes fell with the wind, landing on his hair and shoulders. Luo Qingchen saw that half of his body was outside the umbrella and raised her right hand to pat his shoulder. "But no matter how sad the story is, it doesn't matter. It's good that I'm by your side now. If her guess wasn't wrong, the boy in the story should be Nan Yixing. After all, he was born in the royal family and had to bear the fate of being framed. Whether it was what he ate or used, he had to be careful. Thinking of this, she couldn't help feeling a bit of heartache for Nan Yixing. He had been walking on thin ice since he was young. But his personality was still so gentle. Even those bottomless eyes, she often couldn't see through them. Nan Yixing looked at Luo Qingchen, who pursed her lips and had a faint smile on her face. In the sky full of snow, his heart couldn't help trembling. It was like she was the only person in the world who didn't scheme against him and could stand firmly by his side. His cold and lonely heart, in this snowy land, deeply trembled for the first time. Ding, affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 50%. The sudden system notification stunned Luo Qingchen. Before she could come back to her senses, Nan Yixing suddenly grabbed her raised right hand. In the next second, she fell into a warm embrace. He didn't say anything, but the strength of his hands around her was very deep. Nan Yixing! She softly opened her mouth and called his name. He replied in a slightly trembling voice, "Un." Luo Qingchen had a very special feeling in his warm embrace. She felt that the one hugging her was the real Nan Yixing. Persistent, patient, domineering, deep. It wasn't the usual. Gentle. After that day, Nan Yixing treated her even better than before. He almost never left her side. Every day, he would wake up early and return to the side chamber to personally comb her hair. In the afternoon, he would bring a large heater and sit in front of the window to look at the snowy scenery outside. He also liked to make some snacks for her: osmanthus cake, peach blossom soup, pear blossom persimmon cake, and so on. As the sun set in the west, he brewed a pot of hot tea and enjoyed the tranquil time. The day before the wedding, he took a sip of biluacun and looked at Luo Qingchen quietly. "Does little Chen like this kind of day?" Hearing this, Luo Qingchen turned her eyes and looked into his slightly deep eyes. She asked with some confusion, "Who in this world doesn't like this kind of life?" She couldn't see the meaning in his bottomless eyes, but she knew that there were many things that he hadn't told her. "If the time of ease is always short, do you also like this ease?" This question sounded very contradictory, but Luo Qingchen understood the meaning behind it. Chapter 1851. Nan Yixing looked at her for a long time and finally smiled. He raised his right hand and rubbed her head. "You're right." Outside the window, the snow danced in the sky. They looked at each other and smiled. If the rings of time stopped at this moment, it would be a beautiful thing. But whether it was him, her, or it, everything in the world had to move forward with time. No one could escape the arrangement of fate. On the day of the wedding, she wore a phoenix coronet and a red gown embroidered with pomegranate flowers. She wore a 10,000-year auspicious hairpin on the top of her head. She was admired by tens of thousands of people. Nan Yixing stood by her side, holding her hand tightly from beginning to end. The sound of gongs and drums kept ringing in her ears. The whole world seemed to be blessing her. She easily became Nan Yixing's only official wife. No, to be exact, she was his wife. The first bow to heaven and earth, the second bow to the parents, husband and wife bowed to each other. He held her hand and silently said in his heart, "Qingchen, no matter what happens in the future, please believe in me." On the wedding night, the red candles swayed gently. Joy and pleasure meeting in the mortal world. Looking up at the sky, who could understand the prosperity? Just like that, she became his wife, his rightful wife. Originally, he thought that these days would continue for a while. Little did he know that changes always came too quickly. On the 7th day after the wedding, Nan Yixing hurriedly returned to the Star Palace and quickly tidied up his clothes. Luo Qingchen walked out of the inner hall and looked at him in confusion. "What's wrong?" "Tidy up your things. We'll leave for the Mu Kingdom in the afternoon." Nan Yixing looked at her and said, "Father has a strange illness." This matter should be related to the concubine from the Mu kingdom that was just taken in a few days ago. You mean Liang Ji? Luo Qingchen frowned. She had some impression of this person. When Nan Wang took her as his concubine, Luo Qingchen had noticed this person. At that time, she was already Nan Yixing's official wife. Liang Ji's rainbow dress heaven and earth dance stunned everyone and directly caught Nan Wang's eye. But Luo Qingchen knew very well that she had been looking in her direction the whole time. Yes. Nan Yixing's expression was very serious, but he was still very patient when talking to her. He said softly, "You should have seen him at that banquet." "I remember." Luo Qingchen nodded. "Where is she now? Have you interrogated her?" "She has been sent to prison." Nan Yixing frowned. "I didn't get anything out of her." She refused to admit it. Luo Qingchen's eyebrows moved slightly, and a touch of worry flashed through her eyes. "Why don't I ask her?" "Don't." Nan Yixing responded almost instantly. He narrowed his deep eyes and said, "Don't go to a place like prison." She nodded slightly and looked at him seriously with her clear eyes. Then, she smiled and said, "Okay." Although she promised him on the surface, she still took the opportunity to go to the prison when he went to the Golden Palace to bid farewell. "Your Highness the Crown Princess." Nan Yixing's guards were standing on both sides of the door. They were naturally respectful when they saw her death. Luo Qingchen faintly nodded and said with a calm face, "His Highness, let me ask Liang Ji a few more questions. We will go to the Mu country to find the antidote later." The guards standing at the front looked at each other before opening a path. "Your Highness the Crown Princess, please." Luo Qingchen walked in with light step. After taking 2 steps, she raised her right hand and said, "You don't need to follow me in. His Highness has a few questions for me to ask her alone." Chapter 1852. Liang Ji was locked in the innermost secret cell of the heavenly prison. It was a death cell surrounded by iron walls that didn't even have a small window. Liang Ji wore a white prison uniform with her long hair hanging down. She leaned against the wall and only slowly opened her eyes when she saw someone enter. Luo Qingchen could clearly feel a faint light flashing through her eyes the moment she saw her. "I wonder why Crown Prince Consort has come?" Liang Ji knew that the woman in front of her was the last straw to save her life. But after several years of being an assassin, she knew that she couldn't reveal her true feelings at this time. Otherwise, once the other party saw through her, she would have lost half the battle. Little did she know that in the next second, Luo Qingchen shrugged her shoulders and her pair of bright eyes seemed to see through her thoughts. Her lips curled into an extremely faint smile as she said, "I know very well what kind of person you are, and I also know very well what you're thinking." "You?" Liang Ji was speechless and her expression unconsciously became a bit flustered. "After all, with your current identity, you should more or less call me Senior." Luo Qingchen's gaze fell on the pattern on her shoulder. It was the pattern that every single one of Mu Hanche's secret guards had. Except for her, at that time, the original owner was afraid of pain and tears had already fallen drop by drop before the needle had even landed on her shoulder. Mu Hanche, who was sitting on the high seat, slightly knitted his brows and then waved his hand. "Forget it." The memories of the past became clearer under the passage of time. She could more or less understand why the original owner liked Mu Hanche so much. It wasn't that that man didn't have any love for her, but because he was too cold. He was so cold that he could sacrifice anything, including the secret guards who had once risked their lives for him, including her. "Since you know who I am, then you should know your own identity." Liang Ji bit her lips and looked at her. "What is your purpose for coming here?" "My identity?" Luo Qingchen's lips curled up and she narrowed her eyes. "I am the Crown Prince Consort of Nanzhao Kingdom. My purpose for coming here is to marry Nan Yixing." "What did you say? You actually betrayed His Highness Mu." Liang Ji's face was filled with disbelief. Before she became Mu Hanche's secret guard, Song Lu had told her that Little Chen was the most outstanding among Mu Hanche's secret guards. And Little Chen, for his sake, would go back no matter how dangerous the place was. Even if he was seriously injured, he would never take a step back. How could such deep feelings change so easily? Did I betray him? Luo Qingchen narrowed her cold eyes and sneered. From the day Chiemo died, I was no longer her secret guard. For a long time, the air was silent. Liang Ji did not respond to her. She just closed her eyes and sighed. Luo Qingchen looked up at her and said, "I'll ask you 2 questions. If you always answer me, maybe I can help you leave here." "Really?" "Of course." There was a faint sparkle in Luo Qingchen's eyes as she said, "First, was it you who poisoned King Nan? If you did, where is the antidote?" "It wasn't me who poisoned him." She raised her red phoenix eyes and frowned. "My purpose for coming here is to find you, not to harm Prince Nan." "You came to find me?" Luo Qingchen looked at her in confusion. "But I've never received any request from you to meet me." After all, Liang Ji had entered the palace for more than a day or 2. If she wanted to see her, it wouldn't be difficult. Chapter 1853. Luo Qingchen was stunned when she heard this, and a trace of doubt flashed in her eyes. "You mean that you came to find me, but were stopped by His Highness?" "Yes." Liang Ji gave a chuckle and crossed her arms. "I'm very envious of you. After all, you don't need to bitterly love someone else, and can receive the love others give you." Liang Ji's eyes were filled with sadness, and there seemed to be a story in those slender eyes that others didn't know about. At this moment, Luo Qingchen did not doubt her words. After all, there was no benefit in lying to her. "The second question." She slightly lowered her eyes, and there was a trace of worry in her clear eyes as she asked, "Is Song Lu well? You still care about her?" Liang Ji gave a soft laugh. "I thought you had already forgotten about her. It seems like you won't be leaving first." Don't. Liang Ji narrowed her eyes and said, "Song Lu is very good. After you left, His Highness never let her participate in any missions. She's eating and drinking well. But Song Lu wanted me to tell you something. I don't know if you still want to hear it." "What is it?" "She said that since she left, don't come back." Liang Ji paused before continuing, "Don't ever come back." Although these words came from Liang Ji's mouth, Luo Qingchen could still feel her heart tremble. Song Lu. In a long time, she felt the most heartache for the supporting female lead. No, perhaps she couldn't be considered a supporting female lead. She had always existed as a guardian, protecting Qi Mo, protecting her. But she had worked so hard and Qi Mo still died. "I've asked everything I need to ask." Luo Qingchen's brows slightly moved as she said, "I will find someone to take you away in the evening. You can just follow her. As for whether you want to return to the Mu country or go somewhere else, it's up to you." She said these words to Liang Ji, and it was completely from the bottom of her heart. Because she knew how painful the process of becoming a shadow guard was, and how bleak the ending would be. "Wait, I have a question for you." Luo Qingchen was about to turn and leave when Liang Ji called out to her. She narrowed her eyes and said, "You said, Prince Nan, is Prince Nan well?" Her eyebrows trembled slightly, clearly trying to hide her emotions. But in Luo Qingchen's eyes, her emotions were completely written on her face. Xia was actually worried about Prince Nan? Not so good. Luo Qingchen told the truth. She narrowed her eyes and said, "His Highness and I will go to Mu country to look for the antidote. If His Highness guessed correctly, Prince Nan should have been poisoned by spirit-altering powder." "What?" Liang Ji's eyes widened as her face instantly turned pale. The soul-altering powder was a secret medicine of the Mu kingdom. The poisoned person would fall into a deep sleep, as if their body and soul had been separated. If the poisoned person did not find the antidote within 15 days, he would never be able to return to his position. "It seems that you really care about Prince Nan." Luo Qingchen took a deep breath and said, "Don't worry, His Highness and I will find a way to get the antidote back. You just need to ensure your own safety first. You don't have to worry about anything else. But, Liang Ji. Luo Qingchen interrupted her words with a faint cold glint in her eyes. Don't forget your own status, unless you want to see your close friend die in front of you. As soon as her voice fell, she waved her sleeve and turned to leave the prison. Standing outside the door, she looked at the blue sky and the snowflakes slowly falling down. Chapter 1854. Even though they were in a hurry, Nan Yixing had brought everything about her. After all, the weather in the Mu country was colder than in the Nanzhao country. It was always better to bring more clothes. It will take 7 days to come and go. Luo Qingchen frowned slightly. You don't have to bring so many things for me. Thinking back, the original owner had spent nearly half a month on the road from the Mu country to the Nanzhao country. Now that they were saving someone, they naturally had to travel through the night. But Nan Yixing's pace wasn't as fast as she had imagined. Adding on the fact that he was carrying a lot of luggage, it was even slower. It doesn't matter. He looked out the window and narrowed his eyes. The poison in Fuang's body will be temporarily suppressed by Aunt Luo Xin using the secret techniques of the Wu people. Don't worry too much. Luo Qingchen looked at his deep eyes and couldn't help feeling a bit of heartache. When this kind of life and death matter really happened in front of them, it was hard for anyone to accept. Luo Qingchen didn't know what to say. She just felt that at least it was good to be with him. You shouldn't comfort me. Luo Qingchen pursed her lips. She raised her right hand and did the same thing he did to her before. She gently rubbed her head. It's all right. The next second, he suddenly raised his right hand and tightly grasped her wrist. He held her hand in his warm palm. It's good that you're here. Nan Yixing really wasn't in a hurry on the road. Everything was based on her health. But because of Luo Qingchen's stubbornness, it took them 5 days to reach the Mu country. Standing on the long street and looking at the white snow, her eyes couldn't help turning red. This was a feeling that came from the heart. Mixed with all the memories and thoughts of the original owner, it spread in her heart little by little. It's good that we brought a lot of warm things. If we stay in an inn, it won't be cold. Nan Yixing held an umbrella and looked over. Seeing her red eyes, he froze and his heart couldn't help but tremble. What's wrong? Luo Qingchen heard this and gently shook her head. Maybe the snow fell into my eyes. As her voice fell, she raised her head and smiled like a warm wind. Where are we going to find the antidote next? Do you have a clue? I think the antidote has already come to find us. Nan Yixing's deep eyes looked not far away. Several people wearing the clothes of the Imperial Guards came over with swords. They respectfully bowed to Nan Yixing. The Mu Wang knows that Your Highness the Crown Prince has come to the Mu country, so he specially ordered us to wait here to welcome you. As his voice fell, he Nanz's. Luo Qingchen didn't look away and directly came forward. Mu Wang? She frowned slightly in confusion. The old Mu king suddenly passed away the day before yesterday. Now, the Mu kingdom is under the command of His Highness Mu. Yesterday, the coronation ceremony was completed. The Imperial Guard nodded slightly, his gaze carrying a profound emotion. Luo Qingchen narrowed her eyes. Although her face was still expressionless, she was very surprised. This meant that Mu Hanch was now the Mu country's king. No wonder their identities were exposed as soon as they entered the Mu city. The Mu Wang definitely couldn't do this, but Mu Hanch was different. He was a meticulous person. He had schemed and plotted for this throne for so many years, hiding so many forces, and finally got everything he wanted. Suddenly, she felt that the original owner wasn't worth it. She did so many stupid things for him, but in the end, she didn't even have the qualifications to stand by his side. Chapter 1855. Nan Yixing quickly shielded her behind him, his beautiful eyes carrying an unfathomable dark light. He narrowed his eyes, his thin lips softly saying, "Please lead the way. Your Highness Nan, this way please." The imperial bodyguards were very respectful towards him, treating them as if they were guests. Luo Qingchen was vaguely worried. If Mu Hanch had directly sent people to kill them, she wouldn't have been so nervous. But now that he was treating them with such courtesy, she really couldn't understand what he wanted to do. The road from the long street to the palace was covered in white snow. Nan Yixing tightly held her hand. Luo Qingchen looked at his back and felt a special sense of security. As long as Nan Yixing was here, she wasn't afraid of anything. Even though she still only had 50% favorability towards him, which was stagnant. Nan Yixing didn't say anything along the way, quietly walking. When they reached the entrance of the side hall, the imperial bodyguard cupped his hands and said, "Your Highness, please wait here. Mu Wang will immediately come over after court." Amen. Nan Yixing nodded indifferently, a faint liguang flashing through his eyes. He glanced at Luo Qingchen beside him, but her expression didn't change. "Are you used to it?" "What?" She actually didn't understand what Nan Yixing meant. She only felt that his unfathomable eyes held an indescribable emotion, so deep. "It's nothing, it's just that the Mu Kingdom is especially cold. I'm afraid you won't be used to it." He touched her frozen, smiling face and said, "Come here." Luo Qingchen blinked her clear eyes and obediently walked to his side. There were snacks and tea on the table. The snacks were the original owner's favorite osmanthus cake and cherry blossom cake, while the tea was the original owner's favorite tea, biluakun. The air was filled with the faint scent of sandalwood, and the entire room instantly warmed up. Nan Yixing sat down and picked up the blue and white porcelain cup on the table. He was about to brew a pot of hot tea for her. "Wait, don't move." Luo Qingchen's eyes widened. She bit her lips and said, "We're in a foreign country. It's best if we don't touch these things." As he finished speaking, he didn't forget to pull Nan Yixing to a seat far away. "Right now we're trapped. Dong and the others have been placed in an inn outside the palace. Do you have any ideas on how to get the antidote?" Hearing this, Nan Yixing's dark eyes stared at her intently, not shifting at all. After a long while, he said, "I'll think of a way to get the antidote. Don't worry." "But, are you that afraid that King Mu will poison us?" Nan Yixing narrowed his eyes, and there was a faint light in his beautiful eyes. It seemed that he had been waiting for an answer that he wanted to know. Luo Qingchen tapped her right hand out of habit as her eyebrows moved slightly. "Mu Hanch is much more shrewd than we thought. Do you know him well?" Nan Yixing's lips were thin, and there was a faint trace of expectation in his eyes. Perhaps he still couldn't bear to part with her. He couldn't bear to part with the person sitting beside him, but he still brought her back. "I don't know him well, but this person is cold to the extreme. In order to achieve his goals, he would do anything. He invited us here today, so there must be some unspeakable matter." Luo Qingchen frowned, then turned to look at him and said, "Why don't we run? The best plan is to find a way to get the antidote." Nan Yixing didn't say anything. He only narrowed his eyes, and there was a trace of worry in his eyes. Two voices were constantly colliding in his heart. One wanted her to leave, and the other wanted her to stay. Chapter 1856. His Highness Mu has arrived. Before Nan Yixing could give her any response, an announcement came from outside the door. In the next second, Mu Hanch walked in. He was dressed in a black robe, and his eyes carried a cold glint. His entire body was exuding a coldness that kept people 1,000 miles away. From the moment he came in, his eyes had been on Luo Qingchen the entire time, never leaving her. "His Highness the Crown Prince of Nanzhao Kingdom has come from afar. Please excuse me for not going out to meet you." Mu Hanch's lips curled into a faint smile. "Please take a seat." This was the first time Luo Qingchen and the original host had seen Mu Hanch smile at her. It was as if a snow lotus had bloomed on an iceberg, causing one's heart to tremble. The only time was when he smiled at someone else. She should be the Empress of Mu Kingdom by now. Nan Yixing nodded lightly. "It should be us who have troubled His Highness Mu." He glanced at Luo Qingchen from the corner of his eyes. When he saw her clear eyes looking at Mu Hanch attentively, he felt upset. In the end, he still fell in love. From the past to the present, from the present to the future. How could that be? It is our Mu Kingdom's honor to have Your Highness and Her Highness the Crown Prince and Her Highness the Crown Prince coming to Mu Kingdom. These snacks were all prepared in advance. He glanced at the table with a chilling gaze. Why hasn't it been moved? Is it not to Your Highness's liking? Before Nan Yixing could speak, Mu Hanch's expression instantly changed. He said to the eunuch behind him, "Men, tear apart the body of the imperial chef who made the snacks and throw him into a mass grave. Yes, His Highness Mu." The eunuch was startled, but he immediately followed up. Beads of sweat dripped down his forehead. His Highness Mu need not be so angry. Luo Qingchen frowned slightly. She walked to the table with a faint smile. She poured herself a cup of tea and drank it in one gulp. "I think it's quite good." He looked at her, just like the first time he saw her. His eyes were deep and blurred. But now they were already serving different masters. He was the king of Mu Kingdom, and she was the princess of Nanzhao Kingdom's crown prince. If Your Highness the Crown Princess thinks it's good, then it's good. Mu Hanch's cold eyes narrowed as his face regained its deathly stillness. A smile hung on the corner of his mouth from beginning to end. But Luo Qingchen knew that this smile represented endless indifference. "Then, thank you very much, Mu Wang." She looked at him with eyes that were no longer filled with expectation and worship, but with indifference. Mu Hanch quietly looked at Luo Qingchen for a few seconds. His eyes were as deep as a bottomless lake. He could clearly feel his heart thumping, and it was extremely painful. It was as if something that had been marked, something that belonged to him forever and ever, suddenly no longer belonged to him. There was another man standing beside her, a man who would never fall in love with her. However, this man had personally brought her to the Mu Nation instead of having her stay in Nanzhao forever. He didn't know what he was thinking. He only knew that he saw a trace of greed in Nan Yixing's eyes. Once a person became greedy, they would be bound by worldly emotions and fall into a quagmire that was like an endless abyss. Thus, he had never allowed himself to become greedy. No matter if it was friendship, kinship, or love. Literally, take good care of this humble one's esteemed guest for the next few days. If you neglect him in the slightest, you can bring your head to see me. He looked at the eunuch behind him and said with a smile, "Your Highness, please stay here for a few more days. There are no forbidden areas in the palace. If you want to leave, just let me know." Chapter 1857. This was the first time Nan Yixing and Mu Hanch had met. Although they appeared respectful on the surface, their hearts were filled with their own thoughts. Walking out of the side hall, Mu Hanch stood in the snow, his heart still beating violently. She seemed to have grown up after not seeing her for so long. When he looked into her eyes, she no longer fled in panic, but faced him head-on. Another man stood beside her, tightly holding her hand, declaring his sovereignty over her. For some reason, this was the first time he felt as if he had fallen into a bottomless abyss. The intense pain in his heart made him realize for the first time how important that girl was in his heart. Or perhaps, his entire life and soul was trembling because of her. "Prince Nan, you've been in the snow for a long time. Don't catch a cold." Eunuch Li softly muttered behind him. Only then did Mu Hanch regain his senses. He took a deep breath and sighed, "There's no need to follow me. This umbrella, there's no need for the umbrella." As his voice fell, he stood with his hands behind his back and walked into the snow. As the cold wind blew, countless snowflakes hit him in the face. He suddenly felt a suffocating feeling so painful that he couldn't breathe. He didn't know how long he walked in the snow. Only when the numbness in his feet overshadowed his heartache did he slowly stop. At this moment, Mu Hanch realized that he didn't want Luo Qingchen to go back. No matter if it was the Nanzhao Kingdom or by Nan Yixing's side. even if he didn't achieve his initial goal. At the same time, in the Mu Shui Hall. This was the side hall that Mu Hanch had arranged for them. It was very close to the main hall. For dinner, Luo Qingchen tried one dish after another before she dared to let Nan Yixing eat. There shouldn't be any poison. Luo Qingchen put the silver needles into the brocade pouch and looked up at Nan Yixing. Let's eat, before her voice fell. His right hand instantly hooked around her waist. Without giving her the slightest time to react, he kissed her without hesitation. With a scorching entanglement and absolute dominance, it devoured all of her thoughts layer by layer, and she fell into a world of chaos. She closed her eyes, her long eyelashes trembling slightly. Between his breaths, she could feel his extreme gentleness, as well as a touch of sadness. Luo Qingchen didn't know why she had this feeling, but it was real. Only Nan Yixing knew how conflicted he was. If I let go of everything to love her, what kind of ending will it be? He didn't know, he only knew that she couldn't go back. She absolutely couldn't go back to the Nanzhao kingdom. There was still a part of the story from 400 years ago that had not been passed down to the common people, and that was the heavenly spirit flower array itself was an evil spirit array. It was an evil spirit array that required the saintess sacrifice every 400 years. Otherwise, the sky and earth would change color, the sun and moon would lose their light, and the sandstorm would quickly submerge the entire Nanzhao kingdom. Everyone would die. The purpose of the saintess' existence was to prevent this disaster. Some stories ended too quickly, and there was no time to see the ending clearly. He knew her identity from the day she entered the Star Palace as an assassin. She was Mu Hanch's secret guard, the saintess of the Wu people. He knew everything. He even knew that her purpose in coming to the Nanzhao kingdom was to die for him. But he still hoped that she didn't have any identity. He only wanted her to stand by his side and become his only bride. He could madly pamper her with everything in his life. As long as she was happy, he would feel that everything was worth it. Even if there was always a thorn in his heart, he didn't dare to continue loving her because he couldn't let her stay in the dangerous Nanzhao kingdom. Therefore, he had to have a legitimate reason to bring her back. Chapter 1858. After a long while, he slowly released her. His deep eyes were red. Luo Qingchen narrowed her eyes. Even if he didn't say anything, she could still feel his sorrow. Luo Qingchen bit her lips and looked at him. What's wrong? Since the day she met him, she had never seen Nan Yixing act like this. Everything he did for her seemed to be gentle and soft, and not the irresistible domineering feeling in the depths of her heart at this moment. After a long while, he said, "If you find out that I have a lot of secrets one day, will you be angry with me? Everyone has secret." Luo Qingchen nodded slightly and looked into his eyes. "If you don't say it, you must have your reasons." She was very clear that Nan Yixing had something he couldn't say. However, she wasn't puzzled by this point. Even though she could feel the other party's almost perfect affection for her, his favorable impression of her was forever stuck at 50% and never increased. He looked into her eyes, his deep ink-like eyes faintly glowing. He seemed to want to say something but didn't have the chance, because the voice of Mu Hanch's personal eunuch came from outside the door. "This servant, Xiao Li, requests an audience with your highness." Nan Yixing frowned slightly and said in a clear and cold voice, "Come in." "Greetings to your highness and crown princess." Eunuch Li respectfully bowed. He raised his eyes and said, "Tonight, King Mu and Princess Consort are reading a scroll about the Nanzhao kingdom in the imperial study. It's about the story between the Wu people's saintess and the Nanzhao king. However, due to the language barrier, there are some parts that Princess Consort can't understand. This old servant has come to invite your highness the crown princess. I wonder if your highness has the time to come with this old servant." It was such a high-sounding reason that no one could refuse even if they wanted to. Luo Qingchen narrowed her eyes and looked at Nan Yixing from the corner of her eyes. Just as he was about to refuse, she spoke up first. They were currently in a disadvantageous situation, and Mu Hanch was an overly meticulous person. Even the original owner couldn't guess his thoughts after being by his side for so many years, let alone her. I happen to be free. Her gaze was indifferent as the corners of her mouth curled up. Lead the way, eunuch. The next second, when she was about to walk forward, Nan Yixing's right hand tightened and his grip on her hand tightened. His brows were tightly furrowed, and his thin lips were slightly pursed, as if he had 1,000 words to say, but it was difficult for him to say a single one. At this moment, he had a feeling that if the girl in front of him left, she would never return. I'll be back soon. Can you light a lamp and wait for me to come back? Luo Qingchen's mouth outlined a faint smile, looked at him seriously and nodded. After a long time, his ink-like eyes seemed to melt. He looked at her with a gentle smile and said, "All right." He let go of her and his heart sank as he watched her leave. It turned out that the feeling of pain could be so obvious. It turned out that his heart was so reluctant when he saw her for the first time. He should have known that there were some things that he could not escape from. In the vast sea of people, he saw her slightly raised head and her bright and clear eyes. Perhaps, at that time, he had already changed all of his thoughts and original intentions. However, he still couldn't open his mouth. He couldn't say everything. Even if she knew in the end, even if she would hate him in the end, all he could do was wait. Chapter 1859. Golden Palace Hall. The entire palace hall was brightly lit and was filled with warmth. Standing at the entrance, one could smell the fragrance of ambergris wafting over. Crown Princess Consort, this way please. Luo Qingchen indifferently nodded and walked into the palace hall. Mu Hanch was half leaning on the soft couch. Dressed in a golden robe, his half-narrowed eyes were filled with endless indifference and chilliness. There was a woman leaning against his chest. She was wearing a translucent aqua-blue dress. She was barefooted, and her long black hair hung down. She had an enchanting appearance. The original host had a deep impression of this person. So much so that Luo Qingchen's heart unconsciously trembled the moment she saw her. Crown Princess Consort, it's really been a long time since we last met. Mu Hanch picked up the wine cup beside him and drank it in one gulp. Have you been well these days? The corners of his mouth curled into an extremely faint smile, but it gave off an icy feeling. Every word was as cold as 1,000-year-old ice. Luo Qingchen thought for a bit. Should she use the original host's tone of voice or her usual tone of voice? After thinking for 3 seconds, Luo Qingchen decided to use her usual tone of voice. After all, she was the main character of this plane and was no longer the original host. She could avenge her and fulfill her wish, but she couldn't replace her in expressing her love. Amen. She lightly nodded her head. Her eyes were as calm as water and not the slightest fluctuation of emotions could be seen. Mu Hanch narrowed his eyes. His right hand tightly clenched into a fist and his slender fingertips made a crisp, cracking sound. He was using another method to express his anger. He thought she would understand, but she seemed to not understand. She should understand him. She should know that he was angry every time this happened, but now, why was she so indifferent? He couldn't see the slightest bit of attachment in her clear eyes. Could it be that she really fell in love with that crown prince of the Nanzhao kingdom? Ridiculous, truly ridiculous. Since the day she entered the Mu kingdom at the age of 9, she had never disobeyed her orders. No matter who she killed, she had never once hesitated. But this time, not only did she not kill Nan Yixing, she actually married him and became his crown princess. His heart felt heavy, as if there was a huge rock blocking his chest, suffocating him. I wonder if the crown princess has heard of the story of Nanzhao Kingdom from 400 years ago. My beloved consort and I have a few things we don't understand, so I hope you can help us. As soon as he said that, he gently lifted Eugene Er's chin with his right hand and pressed his thin lips against hers. Only then did he slowly look up at Luo Qingchen. Eugene who was in his arms, turned her head away shyly and snuggled into his arms with blushing cheeks. Luo Qingchen couldn't help but think of the scene when the original owner saw Eugene as a child. It was really a stubborn and humble love. But she wasn't the original owner. In the next second, her lips curled into a faint smile. Her snow-white face didn't show any emotion. She smiled and said, "It would be my pleasure. I wonder if there's anything Prince Mu doesn't understand? I can answer it for you." A gust of cold wind blew in through the crack in the door. The surrounding atmosphere fell into a deathly silence. Mu Hanch coldly looked at her and said without any warmth, "Do you know how the saintess sacrificed the heavenly spirit flower array and calmed the sandstorm?" Chapter 1860. She really didn't know what the end of the saintess from 400 years ago was. Was she dead? If she wasn't, why would she leave Prince Nan alone in this world? It's just a legend. Prince Mu shouldn't take it so seriously. Luo Qingchen's eyebrows twitched slightly, and she actually managed to calm herself down. Little did she know that Mu Hanch suddenly got up in the next second. Eugene who was nestled in his arms, couldn't react in time and fell to the ground. She raised her eyes angrily and glared at Luo Qingchen with her sharp eyes. She pursed her lips and turned to look at Mu Hanch with watery eyes. Jean is in pain. Who exactly was this woman? She actually fell from Mu Hanch's arms. She looked like a vixen. How hateful. Get out! Mu Hanch's voice was so cold that Eugene couldn't react at all. She looked at him in shock. However, Mu Hanch didn't look at her at all. Instead, he was focused on the crown prince consort from the Nanzhao kingdom. Prince Nan. I don't want to repeat myself a second time. He narrowed his eyes. His pitch-black eyes were bloodshot and filled with killing intent. Eugene was so scared that her face instantly turned pale. She immediately knelt on the ground and saluted while trembling. Jean will take her leave. As soon as she finished speaking, she left the Golden Palace with trembling legs. She rarely saw Mu Hanch so angry. She knew that if she didn't leave, given Mu Hanch's temperament, it was very likely that he would kill her directly. Who exactly was that person? Why did she feel that she was a little familiar? After Eugene left, she and Mu Hanch were the only two people left in the Golden Palace. His deep gaze lingered on her, carrying a sense of exploration, confusion, and a hint of reluctance. "Have you completed your mission?" After an unknown period of time, he slowly opened his mouth and asked a question that he already knew the answer to. Luo Qingchen nodded slightly and replied with an indifferent expression, "I don't understand what Prince Mu is talking about." In an instant, Mu Hanch's eyes narrowed as he pulled out the long sword beside the table and attacked her. Luo Qingchen snorted coldly, narrowed her eyes, and jumped back almost at the same time, dodging his attack. In the next second, she sneered, "What is the meaning of this, King Mu? Silencing them? Don't use such a casual tone to talk to me." His ears were slightly red, and his originally cold expression became angry. She could be angry, she could be furious, she could even scold him. But he just couldn't accept it. She looked indifferent, as if she didn't even know him. She raised her clear eyes and smiled faintly. "What kind of tone does Mu Wang think I should use when speaking to you? Is it because I'm not respectful enough?" "You know what I'm talking about." Mu Hanch clenched his teeth and said with a mocking smile, "Could it be that you're telling me that you've fallen in love with him?" "Yes." Luo Qingchen nodded. Her gaze was indifferent as she looked at him and said, "I am his crown princess. Naturally, I love him." "I don't believe you." His gaze was faint as the corners of his mouth curled into a sneer. "If you know what kind of person he is, perhaps you won't say such laughable words. Nan Yixing, the person with the highest martial arts in this world of three. As the only disciple of the Sword Immortal, his shrewdness was definitely not something that ordinary people could match. Chapter 1861. You can say all the bad things about him. If I leave him, it'll be my loss. She nodded slightly, her gaze resolute without the slightest hesitation. Although she only had a 50% favorable impression of him, she had learned to accept and give love after such a long time. She understood that Nan Yixing was good to her. Even if she didn't have a 100% favorable impression of him, she had never been at a loss. Even if she knew that he had secrets that he couldn't tell her. Good, 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 Mu Hanch said good 3 times in an instant. He put down his sword and strode to her side, grabbing her wrist and pressing it against the wall. His gaze was cold and angry as he looked at her. Do you know why I want you to go to Nanzhao Kingdom to kill him? Luo Qingchen frowned. She wanted to break free, but found that Mu Hanch's strength was too strong. Struggling was useless. She didn't want to alarm the guards outside, so she could only remain in a deadlock. However, she didn't respond to Mu Hanch. The next second he said, "If he doesn't die, then you will." It had to be said that Mu Hanch's simple words had indeed caused her heart to tremble. Her eyes trembled, and she actually managed to calm her breathing. She clenched her fists and calmly said, "Do you think I will believe you? Nan Yixing will inevitably become the king of Nanzhao Kingdom in the future, and you are the only saintess who can save the Nanzhao Kingdom from the curse of the Heavenly Spirit Flower formation." Mu Hanch looked at her somewhat flustered expression and coldly smiled. "You still don't know. You aren't called Xiao Qin. Your original surname is Luo and your name is Qingchen." She naturally knew that she was called Luo Qingchen, but she didn't know that she was the Wu People Saintess. She recalled what Aunt Luo Xin had said, that the Wu People Saintess had disappeared a long time ago. She didn't expect that it was actually her. So what? She pursed her lips and looked up. "Even if I'm the Wu People's Saintess, it doesn't mean that I have to die if he doesn't. Do you think that the lives of the hundreds of thousands of citizens of Nanzhao Kingdom are more important to Nan Yixing, or you?" Mu Hanch shook his head. His gaze carried a dim light as he said in disdain, "Why do you think a strange woman like you can become the crown prince's consort without any status?" Luo Qingchen furrowed her brows tightly, her whole body trembling. Actually, she knew very well what kind of person Mu Hanch was. He was ruthless, perverse, cold and emotionless, and he killed without blinking an eye. No matter if it was an enemy or a secret guard that he had personally trained, but he wouldn't lie. Everything he said was mostly true. Even if she resisted in her heart, it was useless. "You seem to know the reason from the look in your eyes." Mu Hanch chuckled softly. He slowly released her wrist and said, "Because your husband, Nan Yixing, must have already told Prince Nan about your identity. The Wu People's Saintess can break the curse of the Heavenly Spirit Flower formation that only appears once every 400 years. At this moment, she was at a loss. No matter how strong her heart was, she couldn't accept this fact. She really panicked. "Miss Luo Qingchen, I can tell you one more thing." Mu Hanch looked at her trembling eyes. A faint trace of confidence flashed through his eyes as he said, "You definitely don't know how powerful he is in martial arts, right? It's rumored that the Crown Prince of Nanzhao Kingdom is as weak as a scholar. In reality, even if you and I worked together, we wouldn't be his match. Don't say any more." She closed her eyes and said in a trembling voice, "I still believe him. Even if he didn't tell me anything, he didn't lie to me either." Chapter 1862. She didn't know how to face Nan Yixing when she returned to Muxua Hall. She didn't seem so sad, but her mood was so low. The candlelight in the hall swayed gently. He had left a lamp on, as if waiting for her to come home. Suddenly, Luo Qingchen felt that she seemed to understand Nan Yixing a little bit. He wasn't as peaceful as she thought. Those deepest secrets were always hidden in his heart, and he didn't tell anyone. "You're back." He stood with his hands clasped behind his back under the candlelight. His clothes were as white as snow. He seemed to be waiting for something, and also seemed to be afraid of something. A faint uneasiness came from the bottom of his heart. He looked at her face and frowned slightly. Yes. She responded faintly and walked towards the light step by step. Nan Yixing looked into her eyes and narrowed them slightly. Looking at her deep eyes, he knew that she knew everything she should know. I have a few questions to ask you. Her voice was cold and deliberately estranged. Nan Yixing could tell at once. Ask away. He looked at her eyebrows. Under the candlelight, her clear eyes looked so beautiful. His heart was slightly startled. Under his strong heart was an incomparably fragile heart that only he knew. You know that I'm the saint of the Wu people, right? Her voice was faint. The moment she raised her eyes, there was a touch of Li Guang in them. Yes. You know that I'm Luo Qingchen, right? Yes. Prince Nan agreed to let me marry you because of my identity, right? Yes. Nan Yixing, you really know everything. Luo Qingchen closed her eyes, her right hand trembling. The corners of her mouth unconsciously curved into a self-deprecating smile. So this was the reason why his favorability was stuck at 50%. It turned out that she had never entered his heart. Qingchen, he said softly, as if he wanted to explain something. But all the words were stuck in his throat. He couldn't say a word. In an instant, the candlelight flickered and the entire Mu Shui palace fell into darkness. The window behind her was smashed with a bang, and a man in a black night suit attacked Luo Qingchen. She could have dodged, but she didn't. In the blink of an eye, a figure in snow-white clothes appeared in front of her. The figure quickly grabbed the sword in the assassin's hand and slit the assassin's throat. He looked up with a cold gaze and said softly, "Who is it?" "King Mu has arrived." The door opened and Mu Hanch, who was dressed in a black robe, stood outside the door. He looked at her with a faint dark light in his eyes and said, "It's time to go home. It was time to go home. It was time to go home. It was time to go home." If the original owner could hear these words, she would be so moved. Unfortunately, she would no longer be able to hear it. She had never regretted falling in love with Mu Hanch, even if this man was cold to the point of despair. Nan Yixing was surprised. Seeing Luo Qingchen's calm as water eyes, he instantly understood the meaning of the assassin that had just appeared. But so what? Even if he knew, even if time came again, he would still choose her. Because he couldn't let her suffer any harm. I still have one last question. She turned around, her eyes flickering with a faint mist. She pursed her lips and said, "You know that I'm an assassin from the Mu Empire, right?" "Yes." Chapter 1863. Your Highness Crown Prince, since you know Qingchen's identity, how about we make a deal? Mu Hanch knitted his brows. Seeing the two of them looking at each other, he really didn't feel good in his heart. Thus, he directly broke the atmosphere. "Speak." Nan Yixing's words were concise and comprehensive, his tone cold to the bone. "I know your purpose for coming here. Although Liang Ji wasn't the one who poisoned you, I can give you the antidote you want." Mu Hanch paused, then his starry eyes lit up. "She can't go with you anymore." He didn't know why, but he had clearly planned everything to send her back. But when she really had to leave his side, his heart would hurt so much. She probably didn't know that he liked her so much. "All right." Nan Yixing's cold eyes narrowed. "I agree." "Straightforward." Mu Hanch's lips curled into a confident smile. He raised his eyes and said, "I've already prepared the antidote and carriage. Since Duke Mu is poisoned, I won't keep your Highness Crown Prince." His slender fingers trembled slightly. The pain in his chest made him feel suffocated for a moment. But he knew that he had to hold on. He had to hold on no matter what. There were some things that only he needed to know. In his eyes, she had always been a child. She didn't need to know about the matters between the Nanzhao kingdom and the Wu people, nor did she need to take responsibility. "All right." He raised his clear eyes, wanting to look at Luo Qingchen again. But in the end, he didn't do so. He was afraid that if he looked at her again, he would rush forward and hug her without a care for anything else. Then, all his previous efforts would be in vain. Luo Qingchen stood in place, waiting for him to say that he didn't want to make this deal. She waited for him to say that he only wanted his crown princess. But he only said one word indifferently, "All right." He didn't try to persuade her to stay, didn't have any reluctance. He was so calm, as if they had never gotten married, never consummated their marriage, and never lived those happy days. He left like this, treading on the snow without even looking back. "Do you understand now?" Mu Hanch's right hand gently lifted her chin so that they were at eye level. He looked at her and said word by word, "If you weren't the saintess, he definitely wouldn't have chosen you. I'm trying to save you, you know. I don't need you to save me." Luo Qingchen raised her right hand and slapped his right hand away. She narrowed her cold eyes and said with a smile, "I'm not trying to keep him. I just want him to leave safely." "Luo Qingchen, you..." Mu Hanch's eyes were bloodshot from anger. He clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth. "Did you think that I would let him leave safely?" He was so angry that he called her by her full name. She had only had eyes for him since she was young, and his figure was the place where her gaze stopped. But now, she kept saying that the reason she stayed by his side was to protect another man. "Mu Hanch, you're going back on your words." Luo Qingchen was clearly startled. The sadness she felt in her heart instantly vanished like smoke in thin air. At this moment, there was only one thought in her mind. Nan Yixing, Nan Yixing, Nan Yixing. My deal is to give him the antidote. It doesn't mean that I'm letting him go. He coldly snorted. Killing intent flashed through his eyes as he looked at her and asked, "Do you think that his exceptional martial arts can break through my 1,000 guards?" Mu Hanch had absolute confidence at this moment. If he wanted someone dead, that person wouldn't be able to live.